Welcome in, I'm Gav. This video is part 2 of my conversations with Brian Weissman. Part 1 was all about his Magic the Gathering origins, and that video can be found in the description or the card at the top right of this video if you're interested. This time around we talked about PC gaming in the 90s to early 2000s, Brian's love for Diablo II, how he met Chris Wilson, Erik Olofsson, and Jonathan Rogers, as well as how they went on to form grinding gear games and see their vision of Path of Exile through, from Chris Wilson's garage to where they are today. I realize that this is a lengthy one, so I've gone through and added timestamps for your convenience, which can all be found in the description. Like and subscribe to support my channel, and without further ado, here's Brian.
Gav, it is so nice to be with you today. A conversation a long time in the making. We actually talked before and had an extensive talk about Magic the Gathering, which serves as a really good segue into this story. Magic is interwoven into it completely. But fundamentally, my story, a huge facet of it, involves the history of how I came to be a co-founder of Grinding Gear Games in 2006. What led up to that and all the kind of integral parts both before and after the founding of the company in 2006. It's a really cool and fascinating story. Hopefully we cover a lot of it.
It's the origin story behind the origin story, and we're excited. Yeah, if you just want to start off talking about how you enjoyed gaming in the 90s and perhaps began getting into Diablo II and things like that.
My life story goes all the way back to I was born in 1974. In Palo Alto, California, which is kind of the tech nexus of Silicon Valley in a way. Hewlett-Packard got its start in a little garage a few miles from where I was growing up, actually.
Awesome.
And the consequence of living in, the heart of Silicon Valley, according to the HBO show, because it takes place in Palo Alto, was that my dad was very tech savvy and utilized a lot of very expensive computational machinery to run his environmental consulting business. I remember they bought a calculator, one of the original calculators that you could buy. It was gigantic, a huge brick with red lettering on it. You know how much they paid for a calculator?
How much? Was it Texas Instruments or?
I don't remember that. I remember playing with it as a kid when I was maybe 4 or something. It was enormous, and I'd press the buttons and add numbers together and stuff.
How much was it?
$2,000 in like 1978 or something. But that's how important technology was to my family. And one day my dad came home with, actually I remember we were on a vacation in Tahoe, and he unveiled Pong, the OG gaming system.
Awesome.
Which came with these little paddles and a game where you could play that was basically squash, where you just knock a white pixel back and forth.
Yeah.
It also came with this enormous black light gun, which was a very modern tool in retrospect. Like the original Nintendo Entertainment System had a light gun that you could play duck hunt with and stuff. This was a much earlier version of that, but it worked basically the same way. It just looks to see if it's light or dark. So if you're shooting at a black background and it sees dark, it misses. If you see a white thing, you hit it. I actually learned my very first exploit from playing Pong. When I was 5, I was playing the target game, and my sister was sitting in front of me, watching me play it, and I'm shooting it pretty well. And then I cranked the speed up, and I'm like, wait a minute. And I pointed it at the light to my right, and I shot it at the light.
Yeah.
And it worked because it was looking at a light. So I cranked it up to max speed, and my sister's watching fascinated as I shoot unerringly 5 or 6 shots in a row just by cheating and shooting it at the light. So I played original Pong, and then a few years later, I think in 1982, my dad brought home what was the very first home PC, as far as I know. It was a machine called a Kaypro, Kaypro 2.
Yeah.
And the 2 stood for megahertz, 2 megahertz computer with no hard disk. And even though the capabilities, it had a screen this big.
Yeah.
So approximately 6 inches diagonal, maybe a little bigger, maybe 8. And all ASCII characters. There was no graphics.
Okay.
Green screen. It had like that green kind of glow to it from old monitors. But even though this game was incredibly primitive, it had like a little keyboard that you could clip off on the front of it because it was meant to actually be portable, and you carried it with a handle on the top.
So it was like a laptop almost.
Yeah, a super OG laptop.
That's insane.
And enormous. It probably weighed 30 pounds. It was very big and heavy and cumbersome. Anyway, people started making games for the Kaypro almost right away. And those games flowed through my experience as a little kid. One of the first games I played was called Adventure, although apparently it was also known as Colossal Cave. And it was a
Okay.
text-based adventure game where it gives you prompts, it tells you where you are, and you just basically say, go south, go right, fight troll, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And you make your way through an imaginary dungeon that you have to build in your mind and in your imagination.
Yeah.
I love that game. I got totally addicted to it. I used to have dreams about it that I saw in vivid 3D detail of stuff that was just described to me on the screen. There was another game that was on there called Ladder, which was basically a version of Donkey Kong, but way better.
Yeah.
Where you had to navigate it was a platformer. You had one screen and you had to make your way up to the top to get this final little treasure. And you had to jump over barrels. And it was a very, very fun game. And I played that game a ton. And then there was another game called Star Traders, which was basically, it was a derivatives trading game in space where you go and you pay attention to these stock charts that come every day, and you make investments in these 5 different commodities. And then you press end turn and it calculates based on your predictions how much money you made. And over time, you can accumulate a lot of money and do very well. So I was playing this game when I was like 6 or 7 or something.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it's so different nowadays,
What was it called again?
right?
Star Traders? I think my dad's spoken about it. Yeah.
I believe Star Traders is the name of the game.
Okay.
Yeah, it probably came out in like 82 or 83.
Yeah.
So I played the Cape Row 2, and then I played its successor, the Cape Row 10, which cranked up the speed from 2 megahertz to 10, and it had a hard disk. And the problem was that because the clock speed of the Cape Row 10 was much faster than the 2, I don't know if it was 5 times faster, but it made almost all the games that I enjoyed impossible to play because they were going at like 3 times the speed.
Lightning fast.
And you could not play ladder anymore, for example. So I didn't like the Cape Row 10 as much. When I was 10 or 11 years old, I bought a Nintendo Entertainment System with paper route money, the original 8-bit one. I think that's what it was.
Nice.
And played all of the classics, Legend of Zelda, Kid Icarus, Metroid, all absolutely amazing games.
Yep.
And back then, there was no clue books. There was no guides on YouTube to how to play or solve anything. So you had to really be creative. You had to explore the game systems and really come to understand them to play them well.
Yeah.
And we used to go at school and talk about Metroid strategy and stuff. I had this one kid in my art class who just lied to me all the time about these places you could go to in the game.
Mm-hmm.
You just bombed in the right spot, and I would look forever for the stuff that he told me.
Just word of mouth. I've seen documentaries on games from that time and that era, and they had a literal station set up with people on the line ready to go with magazines and like cheat code strategies, and they just took calls for people that were stuck in games, and they were the guy.
Yeah.
It was a little call center for guides back then.
They made so much money from that. It was a toll call, I'm sure.
Wow.
In fact, yeah, I remember one. It's such a cringe story in retrospect. I'm still embarrassed by it, but I might have been 11 or 12 years old, and I'd been playing Ultima 4 with a friend of mine. Possibly Ultima 3, but I believe Ultima 4 was the game we were playing. Yeah, I think Ultima 5 was the big quantum leap forward in that genre.
Yeah.
But Ultima 4, at the very end of the game, after you've done everything, and Ultima is an early graphical adventure game made by Richard Garriott. He made a whole series of these. I didn't play 1 and 2. I think I started playing it at 3.
Okay.
So maybe this is Ultima 3's story. At the end of the game, you have to descend this dungeon where you go through room after room, and the fights are long and grindy. You go through 7 levels of it. And at the very end, you enter this room and you're asked a series of questions that are really cryptic. They relate to the virtues because Richard Garriott wanted to teach morality through the games that he played. So you were supposed to be a virtuous person. So it asks you these increasingly vague, confusing riddles where the answer is one of the virtues. And my friend and I had played this game for months. We finally get down to the bottom of this dungeon. And we finish the final room. We're going to win. And we start getting asked these questions. And when we get to the 3rd question, we have no idea what it is. So we guess. And instead of being told that you're wrong, guess again. It kicks you out of the dungeon all the way back to the beginning.
Oh my.
Like 7 hours of work gone. The whole afternoon. And we're just aghast. What do we do, right? Yeah. the next weekend, we meet up again to try it again. We go down the dungeon, another 6 or 7 hour run to the bottom. We'd guess that one question again and miss it. And now we're back to the beginning again. And this went on for a couple of months until we just gave up.
Yeah.
So I'm listening to some radio program when I'm maybe 10 or 11 years old. And there's a guy being interviewed on the radio program. And he starts talking about how he's a game designer. And I don't know what made me think that this guy might know the answer, but he was some gaming insider. I'm like, aha, my chance. I called into the radio program. I'm like 10 years old. And I asked the guy, hey, my friend and I were thwarted in this last room. That was the word that I used, actually. Thwarted in the last room. Yeah. Do you know what the answer is to this thing? And the guy's like, and why would he know it? Yeah. Totally random, games. Right?
He has to know, yeah.
Troy, you should know that, of course. He basically told me he wasn't sure, but that he knew the people that were working on the next Ultima game, and it looked really cool, and it had a really neat cutscene at the start of it.
Nice.
So anyway, that was like an early gaming experience, but it relates honestly to kind of something that has informed my entire life and experience as really a game designer from the time I was little.
Yeah.
And that's that I look at systems and I just look for ways to improve them. I generally just don't tend to be satisfied with the status quo, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's kind of my friend Patrick Chapin, who I talked about a little bit in the last video, has a chapter in his one of his books that he wrote about magic called Rogue Ants. Or maybe it's just called Army Ants, I think is actually what it's called.
Okay. And
it relates contextually in that book to the way that groupthink can pervade magic communities, where you have the internet has fixed this quite a bit, but it probably still exists to an extent.
Yeah.
But it was very, very common in the 90s, where you'd have a groupthink situation at one place, whether it's a tournament center or a game store, or just a larger community where you've got one alpha dog who defines the rules and often the morality of the format, what's fair and what's not. And everybody defers to that person. And the result of that is that eventually that group stops innovating. They just kind of walk in a circle. And they're unable to ever get out of this loop.
Yeah.
Because nobody is innovating anymore. They're all just following the leader. And meanwhile, there's a growing, expansive evolution of the game that they're playing that they completely miss. And it was analogous to the idea of army ants in the Amazon rainforest. They pour out of the ground by the millions when they get notice from a scout. There's in the other valley or across the river or the creek is another ant colony that's not army ants. And they pour out by the millions and they walk in a huge sheet across the ground, eating and destroying everything in their path until they get to the ant colony where they attack them. They kill everybody. They enslave the babies. Yeah. They take the babies back to their colony and turn them into slaves. Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. Anyway, every now and then, for whatever reason, as these army ants are moving through the forest, for some reason, they get stuck in a circle because they have no awareness of anything but their little 2D world. It's all pheromones and adjacent ant that they just feel. They're walking in a straight line. And for whatever reason, instead of going towards the target, they start to loop around. And eventually you have this giant maelstrom of army ants walking in a circle until they all die of exhaustion. They're just following the ant in front of them.
I've heard of that, yeah.
But there's an antidote to this. Every now and then, there's sort of a bug in the ant's code where one ant, for no apparent reason, peels off from the group and goes in a different direction. And it leaves behind a pheromone trail. And through probability, another ant eventually encounters that and goes that way too.
Yeah.
And given enough time, generally, this creates a separate track and the ants start to redirect. And eventually the whole colony comes out of the maelstrom and follows the rogue ant back towards where they're headed. I imagine that characteristic exists in more biology than just ants.
Yeah.
It exists in other populations too. And I feel like I am one of those things, for sure. I have just been a rogue ant since the time I was tiny.
Yeah.
And part of that, combined with my general kind of relentless creativity when it comes to magic. When it comes to, well, magic was one example of that, but other games too, is I need to be looking at systems and trying to come up with ways to improve them. So always as a gamer, that was sort of the undercurrent of everything that I did. I always played games to min-max them. I would run through a level over and over and over and over again to try to get the best result when there was nothing to be gained from it. There's no speedrunning community that I can flex on.
Yeah.
I just wanted to do it the best that it could be done. And that kind of informed all of my experience through my childhood and into my teens as a gamer. Everything that I played, I really tried to understand it on a deep elemental level. Eventually in 2019, of course, in 1994, when I was 19, that's how I approached Magic too. And I told that story in the last video.
Yeah.
But I constantly played games and wanted to innovate on them while I was playing them to improve them. Like a really good example, my brother and I played the game Battleship against each other. And Battleship is a perfectly fine game, but it's repetitive. So we started designing special abilities for all the ships. And eventually every ship had its own special ability, and the game was way more fun. It also ended quicker too, because some of the abilities were really powerful. And we played Stratego, that game where you set up all your pieces and they're hidden from the opponent and you take turns capturing their guys.
Yeah.
We made a whole bunch of customized pieces that modified the game and made it way better.
That's awesome.
And all throughout my teens and stuff, whenever I played a game, it was always about min-maxing it and thinking about ways that I might improve it. I actually did some game design. I started programming a adventure game like Adventure/Colossal Cave, this game that I enjoyed as a kid. I learned a programming language called Pascal and started programming this adventure game. But eventually, I just realized how much work it was. After a few months, I just got bored and gave up.
Yeah.
But I never really saw a game in all that time that I thought that I could improve upon in a game that I really, really enjoyed. I certainly saw ways that I could modify these games, but not like take the entire idea and make a better version of it.
Yeah.
And I played dozens of games, honestly. Like, I don't know where I found the time between school and sports stuff. And I had to go. My dad was actually very protective of the family computer, so he put a password on it.
Yeah.
And I had to I eventually figured out I was able to solve the encryption by just reverse engineering the answers and figuring out that it was being generated from a seed related to the date. So
oh my God.
For a few glorious months, like 4 or 5 months, I was able to log in without asking my dad for the password and play a lot more while my parents were at work when I got home from school. But eventually he figured out my strategy. At one point I logged into I entered the password that I figured out and I tried to log in, and it played a program that he had written that showed all of the directories of all of my games being deleted in real time.
Oh.
Like a loud buzzer noise sounding. And I'm like, oh my God, grab the power cable. It was illusion. Like it didn't actually happen. But just a funny story. So I believe the 1990s, mid 1990s, I was bouncing in and out of Palo Alto, where my family still lived. And one day I walk in and my brother is playing a game on his PC because he was still in high school.
Yeah.
And that game is Diablo I.
Okay.
I'm like, whoa, what is this? Holy shit. I sit down to watch him play it. And I'm sure you've seen how Diablo I looks. It's pretty robotic. The animations aren't great. The artwork is pretty low res. It's not like a really graphically flashy game, even for the era. But its sound engineering was amazing. It had incredibly good sound. And just to any aspirant game developers out there, you can't afford amazing artwork and animation. You can afford good sound. And sound is honestly more important than any of that shit. We know this for sure because you go to a theater and you watch a scary movie, you can cover your ears and it totally defangs it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We care way more about sound than we do about visuals when it comes to like emotional resonance and stuff. People really, I think, don't quite appreciate that.
And psychological too. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, anyway, so I'm watching him play Diablo and I go, this game's fucking rad. I mean, this game's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to start playing it too. So I started playing Diablo and I really, really liked it, but I didn't get hooked. And I think one of the reasons why was because Diablo I had something called, well, it was hosted on a thing that Blizzard, I guess still has, called BattleNet. It was a very early version of BattleNet, which was a matchmaking service over the internet.
Yeah.
But because there wasn't a central hub where the Diablo games were hosted, there was no central Blizzard-controlled server. All of the character data in Diablo 1 resided on the host's hard drive. And whether you're hosting just your character or several people that were connected to you, you had access to your character's game file.
Mm.
It meant that people could write mods for their characters. And lo and behold, within a short period of time, even on the early internet, you could download mods that allow you to change the gear on your character. And I watched my brother do that, just modify his guy and have all this crazy shit.
Yeah.
And I kind of went, I don't really see the point of playing this game a lot. There's no way to min-max it. You can just cheat and make your guy insane. So why bother?
Right.
So I didn't really play the game a ton, certainly not as much as a lot of other people. I was still focused on Magic all the time. The Pro Tour had begun right around then.
Yeah.
And I wasn't doing a lot of PC gaming at the time because Magic just took up all of my energy.
I can imagine.
And in 1999, I moved from Palo Alto, where I was staying with my parents, still trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do at the end of my Magic career? Because this is clearly not really turning into anything that's going to support me. And it's actually a very, very hard lifestyle.
Right.
Because you only have about 4 or 5 opportunities a year to make money outside of trading and stuff. And I believe I've done about the best I can at this, and it really hasn't amounted to much. And I'm getting a ton of pressure externally from my parents and my grandparents to go back to school to get serious about my life. And I couldn't communicate to them how important the things that I was doing were, at least to me.
Yeah.
So I moved up to Davis, California in early 1999. And by that time, I believe announcements had already been broadcast everywhere that Diablo II was coming. And I don't think I've ever anticipated and looked forward to a game more.
Yeah.
And I used to go and, read gaming magazines for previews of things that would be coming out a year later. And every month I would go back to it was actually a computer store that had gaming magazines in there. I just sit on the floor in the computer store reading their gaming magazines for hours, looking at all the different games that were going to be coming out, thinking about them.
Yeah.
And I had been anticipating this game forever. I knew that it was going to be good. I saw the pictures of it. It was such quantum leap past Diablo 2. More importantly, Diablo 1. And most importantly, it had something that Diablo 1 didn't have. They were going to be doing this thing called closed servers.
Yeah.
Which is familiar because that's how Path of Exile is hosted as well.
Yep.
Everyone says, hey, I want a home version of PoE. Can I please have a version that doesn't require me to be online? No. The answer is no. You don't want that, actually.
Yeah.
You really don't want that, I promise you. Because the game is majestic and it's very well balanced now in most respects. Obviously, there's always some sort of flavor of the month.
Of course.
But fundamentally, the game's pretty egalitarian. We really succeeded in that way of making it that you couldn't just buy your way into success.
Yeah.
To be a PoE badass, you really do have to understand the game, or you have to at least read a bunch of guides and figure out, and understand what the guide is actually telling you to do.
Yeah.
So Path of Exile 1, very, very egalitarian. And Diablo 2, by nature of having the same style of closed servers that PoE has, was going to be that. And I'm like, oh my goodness, that is fantastic, because now I can actually have the Diablo experience, the real Diablo experience, and I can also, when I min-max the shit out of this game, because it's going to be worth doing now, I'm going to gain acclaim. It's going to be fun. I'm going to have like crazy gear and a crazy collection. I know that that's going to happen. I anticipate that so much. And I remember right when Diablo came out, it released, I think, in 2000. It's like mid 2000.
Yeah. I don't know the exact date. Yeah. 1999, 2000.
The first thing I did was do a little bit of research that was available at the time about who to play first. And that answer was emphatically Necromancer.
Okay.
Because Necromancer had a skill called Corpse Explosion that was way, 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 way over-tuned. It was way OP. Because just like in PoE, each additional person in the game increases the health and EXP reward of all the monsters in the game. We copied that basically exactly to scale the rewards. And while most of the attacks in Diablo 2 do a kind of flat amount of damage, which means they get 10% worse, essentially, every single time another person comes into the game.
Exactly, yeah.
Corpse Explosion did damage equal to the target's entire health pool to a giant radius. And it's scaled with each additional person in the game. So if you had an 8-person game, it does 8 times as much damage.
Yeah.
So all you had to do was kill one unit.
Wow.
Like a giant pack of guys together. Forget about minions or anything. And this ability I used was called Bone Spear because it had a piercing ability. You bone spear the group, and one of them drops, you explode it. 8 of them drop, you explode, and the whole room detonates.
Yeah.
And you run around gleefully picking up the loot. It was totally insanely OP.
That sounds amazing.
So I played Necromancer and sped my way to Act 4 of Diablo II. And I remember very specifically that summer, I think like in August or maybe September, maybe it might have been a little later in the year, I went to Taiwan for the first time. And I was in Taiwan for about 10 days. I was supposed to go and do touristy things. All I wanted to do was go to the local internet cafe, out of the heat, sit down, and play my Necromancer.
Yeah.
Nothing brought me more pleasure in my entire life, probably.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it was so fun. And then they nerfed the Necro pretty quickly after that.
Because everyone was using it, or?
Yeah, I mean, it was just it was insane. Like, if you looked on the ladder, right? The ladder was the metric of who was dominating the game.
Yeah.
And the top like 50 were all Necros for obvious reasons. They were just way more powerful than every other class. I pivoted, I think, to playing a sorceress after that because the sorceress had the next best thing, a skill called Static Field, which is like a big invisible AoE that zips out from you in every direction. And it has a very small radius initially. But once you invest in it, the radius grows to almost cover the whole screen. And what it does is I think everything it hits loses 10% of their current health, not base, but 10% current.
Wow.
So they go to 90 and then they lose 9 more. They go to 81 and then they go to 72. So it has diminishing returns to a point, but a bunch of castings of Static Field shrink the entire mob down to slivers. And then you fire a frozen orb into the middle of them, or 5 frozen orbs, and the whole pack crumples and dies. So I played Sorceress after that and had a blast. So fun doing the cow level, running around, zap, 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 orb, pick up all the treasure.
Entire screen, yeah, that's crazy.
Entire screen, blowing up screens, and min-maxing the game as it continued to grow and propagate. I mean, Diablo II was an immediate bestseller, multi-platinum hit right out of the gate, and it deserved it. The game was objectively amazing. Totally amazing, way better than any game I'd ever played up to that point of its type, and really kind of any type. It obsolesced all of the other games I had ever played on PC.
Yeah.
Right away, because it just incorporated everything that made ARPGs cool, and it was fast-paced and exciting and had great animation sound. It had incredible balance. The characters were just fun to play. Everything felt meaty and impactful and substantial. All the items had this weight. When a ring fell somewhere in the giant throng of dying enemies or whatever, it went ding, and everybody like perked up and ran to try to pick it up.
I completely missed out on that era, unfortunately.
I'm sorry you did.
Yeah.
It'll never exist again. Everyone is just too jaded. Either way, the game left an indelible mark on my consciousness.
Yeah.
And I went after it full bore. I started going back to school to finish my bachelor's degree, which had gotten completely waylaid by magic for about 7 years.
Yeah.
And in every spare moment outside of that, and a few times I was still playing Magic, I played Diablo II. I was just online all day long, trading and playing and grinding and min-maxing, getting my character higher and reading guides and talking about it and building up the sickest collection of gear you've ever seen.
Yeah.
Through hard work and trading. I had the advantage that there were a lot of high-level Magic players who were also playing the game at the time, so we communicated a ton. In fact, one of the people who will factor into this story soon was one of my Pro Tour colleagues, a guy named Frank Gilson, who literally worked at Battle.net.
Okay.
So he was kind of my man on the inside.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a funny story actually about something Frank did to me that bolstered my collection a ton when the expansion came out later. So remind me to tell you that.
Okay.
Either way, he was my man on the inside, and I could get all the insider info, particularly about like I could get almost insider trading information about what was coming next.
Right.
You know, in the next expansion, the update. Oh, this is going to be nerfed. Okay, I'm going to go and trade and blah blah blah. You know, it allowed me to really min max the environment as best I could. And nothing made me happier than playing the game. I would just look forward to it all day. I played all through the weekends and stuff. And about 6 months after it came out, I was still grinding online all the time. A really interesting thing was announced. Lord of Destruction is coming. LOD's, like Diablo's first true expansion, is coming.
Yep.
And when I looked at some of the spoiler stuff for that, it was evident that this was more than just an expansion. This was the second half of the game. There was clearly a lot of design that I'm sure they were working on feverishly, even when the first game came out, that they just realized we're not going to get all of this ready in time.
Yeah.
We need to just get the core game out, build the community, and then when we release the expansion, we're gonna get 3 times the interest. This is kind of, I believe, what happened with StarCraft too, because StarCraft Brood War, the expansion
Brood
of
War, yeah.
StarCraft, is the real game. That's the game that went gigantic. The original game was sort of setting the stage. So Lord of Destruction was Diablo's Brood War. It had so much additional amazing design in it. It had an entire additional tier of base items. Because when Diablo II launched, it only had 2 base types or 2 tiers of bases. PoE, I think, initially launched with all 3 because we had normal, cruel, and merciless difficulties. So the base types were meant to sort of correlate to those 3 tiers of the game and playthrough. Diablo had that too, but they only had 2 tiers of gear initially. And Lord of Destruction was going to add the 3rd tier of gear. How exciting, right? The base types are like exponentially more powerful, which means the weapons are going to be 4 or 5x as good.
The scaling, yeah.
The scaling was going to be crazy. And it had these things called runes, which were there were a million of them. There were like 24 different ones or something. And the runes, the items were going to have sockets. And you could socket runes into the gear to make rune words that were amazing and really interesting and build enabling and build defining and stuff. Just all of this incredible design space that they were exploring in Lord of Destruction. It looked to be the best expansion ever. And I couldn't wait to get started. I'm like, I'm going to min-max the shit out of this. I'm going to make the best character that's ever existed. So in order to get a head start on it, I write to my friend Frank Gilson, who's this Blizzard insider, because a few months after they announced the game, they did a lottery system to allow people to win a closed beta key to get access to Lord of Destruction.
Wow.
And they were only going to give away a few, I think a few hundred or something. I don't know the exact number, but the keys were so rare and valuable that people were probably successfully selling them on eBay for like $1,000.
Oh my God.
And the keys were also transferable. So you could install with it was sort of like having a CD key. So you could just have somebody else install with the same key. It didn't counterfeit the key.
Yeah.
And there were only a couple hundred keys in this pool. And of course, I didn't win one in the lottery. So not to be outdone, I just wrote to Frank and I said, hey, Frank, I'd love to play test the game. Would you be willing to get me a key? Is that possible? And an hour later, I had a beta key. So I transcribed my amazingly, insanely powerful, what's called classic Diablo II character into Lord of Destruction. And I get ready and I do my war cries. I'm on a barbarian at this point because he's the better character for magic finding, it turns out, just based on the gear I had acquired.
Yeah.
And I go running out into the Bloodmoor, the first area, whirlwind my first pack. And I go all the way through it and nothing happened. I go, that's weird. I whirlwind back through the pack again. Nothing happens. I float my cursor over the characters because there's no enemy health plates in the game.
Yeah.
And I see that the enemies are at like 80% health or something. God. And I go, what in the hell's going on? This is Act 1.
And you were just a meat grinder before?
Obliterating everything. Like my guy was insane. I had this crazy ass rare lance that just blended the enemies and stuff that I had traded a King's Ransom for. I may tell a story about that later when I talk about items because it factors heavily in the story.
Yeah.
Crazy ass top end damage, like a 1 in 100,000 rare lance kind of outcome. An insane rare lance. And ridiculous dual leech, magic find gear, all the best stuff, really. And I whirlwind back through the group, back and forth for like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Constantly taking insane damage and then leeching it back up so that I don't die. And after grinding this pack of random level 1 guys, I finally dropped it. And I'm just standing there like, my guy's completely nerfed and gutted. Is this just the way the game is? I tried to play more of it, and it was just the same thing over and over and over again.
Yeah.
I could not kill anything. And at the time, and this is kind of an important part of the story, people who have played PoE from the very beginning might remember the way that loot was handled at the very start. Do you have a recollection of that?
Are you talking about the allocation? I didn't play back then, but I think I know what you're hinting at. Yeah.
You've heard the horror stories.
Yep.
Sure.
Yep.
Chris insisted that we have free-for-all loot in Path of Exile at the beginning because Diablo had it. And generally when it came down to the kind of fundamental quandary of what to preserve from Diablo II when we were making Path of Exile as its spiritual successor, trying to figure out what things really were important, what things mattered the most, what was the special sauce. Because if you imagine Diablo II was a giant pot of stew with 40 ingredients in it.
Yeah.
Well, you can subtract one ingredient, it tastes basically the same. But at a certain point, you take something out and you're like, oh my God, it's totally not the same stew anymore.
Yeah.
Not Michelin star winning, right? And the game is like that. You don't know what to take out. So we had to really experiment and try different things. One of the things that Chris was certain of was that Diablo's random loot allocation was very important for making the game feel exciting, I think. That competitive aspect of it where your heart is thudding in your chest before the monster drops because you're hoping that you have better latency than the 3 guys you're teamed up with. And then you see the golden Hydra bow fall on the ground, a wind force, the best weapon in the game, pretty much, when Lord of Destruction came out. And you're running towards it. Your heart is pounding, clicking frantically, and it disappears. And you're like, did I get it?
Is it in my
inventory? He thought that was
Yeah.
Is it in my inventory? Exactly. And invariably, it wouldn't be. Because you're usually connecting to a server that's 120 milliseconds ping away, and someone is 40, and they got a big head start.
Right.
So Chris was certain that that needed to be in the game. So when we launched Path of Exile, it had no loot allocation at all. It was a free-for-all. And people hated it. Hated it. One of the very first things I remember doing was kind of doing public triage about that, talking to people about it, trying to explain to them why we thought it was important. But ultimately, the example is one thing that Mark Rosewater and others are very. Mark Rosewater has been the head of Magic R&D for years.
Yeah.
And many other game designers have said this, and it's listen to your players because they are good at identifying the friction points and what's wrong with your game. Listen to their complaints, but generally don't listen to and usually disregard their solutions because usually their solutions are not right.
Yeah.
They know what's wrong, but they don't know how to fix it.
Right.
So people immediately were complaining about this free-for-all thing. And then so we talked about different ways to do loot allocation with the timers and stuff. And eventually, of course, that got implemented and it pretty much solved that problem. But Diablo II never changed that. There's no such thing as loot allocation in D2. So I was a min-maxer and a grinder and a spike, and I wanted to go and get all the amazing items in LOD. That was my plan.
Yeah.
And yet when I played the expansion for the first time with the most pimped out gear you could ever have, I can't even kill monsters in Act 1.
Yeah.
And I concluded from that something had been decided internally within the company that they wanted to force players to cooperate in order to beat the new content. That you're going to have to team up. It wasn't just enough to be a whirlwind guy. You needed a sorceress there to cast Iron Maiden on the enemies and to static field them down. You needed a necro to put up a meat shield.
Yeah.
You needed a paladin there for support auras. And you needed team synergies in order to beat the content. And now it would require me to play this game that I played solo with a bunch of random strangers on the early internet with no chat tools or anything.
And free for all loot.
And free for all loot. I'm not going to do that. It's wasting my time. It's just, I know my own temperament. I'm going to just be constantly tilted by this. Why would I want to play this? So I did what I've done many, many times since. I decided to become a gaming activist. Be the change you want to see in the world.
A rogue ant.
Gandhi so famously said. I write up a long ranty post and I talk about first of all, I establish my bona fides. I'm Brian Weissman, the Magic the Gathering thought leader, and you should listen to what I have to say. Because I've been used to being a thought authority in the Magic space for 6 or 7 years. What I basically said was gospel.
Yeah.
Would get circulated through the whole global gaming ecosystem. What is Brian's current version of the deck?
Yeah.
What is his take on Brainstorm related to fetch lands? How does Brian think What does he think about force of will? You know, these things were like debated on the internet.
You were the mind of deck design.
Really, truly, like the pinnacle thought leader at the time. And so what I had to say about Diablo also carried weight. It just unequivocally did. The overlap between people who played Diablo and people who were Magic players, or at least
Yeah.
had heard about me, was pretty close to absolute.
Yeah.
And I sent in this post, and one of the things that I wrote about in my post was, take a look at the gear that I'm using. This is just for reference, guys. It's not a flex. I'm not trying to show you how pimped out my guy is. This is the gear that I'm using on my character, and it is objectively 99.999th percentile. It's better than anything you'll ever get yourself. There's no auction house. There's trade rooms. People complain about trade friction now when all they have to do is copy paste a whisper.
A message.
They think that that's like a massive, unbelievable, soul crushing inconvenience. Back when you wanted to trade in Diablo II, you had to go into a trade room and just read the scroll and hope something showed up that you wanted. That was it. And then you had to barter with items that had no intrinsic value at all. They were extremely subjective. Convince the other person that they should accept your random hodgepodge of unique items and rares for whatever it was that they had.
Yeah.
So I list my gear as a reference point to people that are reading this article, and I say, the game is impossibly hard for me. Imagine how hard it'll be when you play it with your stuff, which isn't 99.99th percentile.
Yeah.
There's only one solution here, people. We must take up the torches and storm the castle and demand that Blizzard nerf their game so that it'll be playable and easier when we play it. And I was doing this, honestly, out of self-preservation and selfishness, because I didn't want to have to team up with other people to play.
Yeah.
But I knew that other people would relate to that, because we already know how people feel about free-for-all loot.
Yeah.
Path of Exile players were loud and clear about how the average person feels about that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a long time ago, too. You know, think about nowadays, 12 years later, in terms of how people feel about the things that I mean, game companies have to bribe people to play their games now.
Right.
A lot of the time. The sense of entitlement that people have about the hard work of game developers is like off the chart. And their entitlement to criticize it, too.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you know, everyone's got a soapbox. But
everyone's an armchair dev.
Totally ridiculous. With no experience. And anyway, I don't want to get into that. So anyway, I put this post up there, and to my shock and delight, it gets hundreds of thousands of views. It's stickied at the very top of the forum of the biggest Diablo II fan site of the time, diabloii.net.
Wow.
And it literally says, you know, a pro player, Magic player's take on the LOD expansion or something like it. It might have even had my name on it. And it got a massive amount of attention, thousands of comments in the thread of people talking about my article. And all these people read it. I can't even imagine how many of them Magic players and stuff. And there was a ton of debate about it. And I'm sure Blizzard read it too. I mean, no question that they read it. One of the people who read that reached out to me maybe a month later, and he introduced himself as Erik Olofsson. And Erik Olofsson had a huge overlap with me personally. We were both pro players, pro Magic players, actually. Erik, living on the other side of the Atlantic in Sweden, was in, I think, the final year or two of his game design, or I'm sorry, art. I don't want to like misstate what his course was.
Yeah.
It was some graduate level, high level graphical art.
And he's published too, right? I'll have to look it up, but yeah.
He was published.
Yeah.
He actually wrote an art book, like a sketchbook, and I did the editing for it.
Oh, wow.
A long time ago. Yeah. A few years after we met, I think, is when I did that. It might have been the next year. And all I did was I just cleaned up the English in it, because Erik speaks English just fine, but you know, I'm a native speaker, so it was good for me to go over it, to give it just one, you know, to clean up some stuff. And anyway, he said, "Hi, my name's Erik Olofsson, and I'm a power gamer just like you. Only I am in Europe on what is essentially a backwater server, because the European server, the Diablo population was divided up into 4 quadrants. You had US West, US East, Europe, and Asia.
Okay.
And based on the internet of the time, this is 25 years ago, Nowadays, right? I mean, Asia would be by far the biggest one. But
Yeah.
back then, the biggest server by far, because of where all the broadband was, most people were still on dial-up in 2000. Where most of the broadband was on the West Coast of the United States. So that server was by far the most populated. The game had lag in it. It had rubber banding and desyncing problems because it was a client-side. Now, modern PoE, right, is called lockstep, and that's how normally everybody plays because everybody's on fiber optics and you have a good ping almost anywhere you are.
Right.
But back then, all the servers were on the West Coast of California. And so ping mattered a ton because otherwise you got desynced constantly and killed by it.
Yeah.
So Erik, living in Sweden at the time and playing, he also played Magic against all the pros there. A bunch of Hall of Fame pros and stuff played. They all played in the same area in Gothenburg.
Wow.
He was very good at Magic.
Yeah.
And he, of course, knew me and he had read articles about me and he played the deck and understood it inside and out. So all that stuff was already established. And Erik knew my mentality. He had read articles and stuff that I had written about Magic and about how my own approach to it. And he's like, I identify with that exactly. I am a spike to the hilt too. But I'm stuck on Europe. And I don't want to play exclusively on Europe because all the cool stuff, the items on West are way better.
Yeah.
The population is like 1,000 times bigger. So, of course, the items are way crazier. And I really want to play I want to play Diablo on the highest level. So I'm going to offer you a trade. You can say no, but if you're interested in going to check out the European server, I will hook you up over there with whatever I have. If you'll just be willing to give me some of your, obviously not the primo stuff, but some of the good stuff so that I can at least get a foothold on the West server. And I'm good enough at the game. I can equip a guy, I can trade, and I can get up to a higher level and I'll have a better time. Would you be willing to do that? And I'm like, totally, dude. Let's talk. Why not?
Yeah.
You know, I met tons of awesome Swedish people on the pro tour. One of them, Ule Rade is his name, who played Magic alongside Erik actually, and is a Hall of Famer and one of the best people to ever play the game. Was a great friend of mine, and I'd met tons of other really cool Swedes. I liked all of them, and I really wanted. It seemed like it would be fun. Erik had a friend too named Matthias, and Matthias and Erik played together, so we were all going to just kind of powwow. So we hung out for a couple of weeks, talking shop, talking strategy. We exchanged items. I went and played on Europe. It was way too laggy.
Yeah.
For me, it just like the internet was just not as good, and I was constantly just desyncing, and it wasn't very fun. But Erik stuck around on the West server, and so I saw him periodically, and I kept playing the game. We're still just waiting for LOD to come out. And about a month after that, I got this really interesting email from Erik, and he said, "Hey man, I hope you're doing well. And I'm still playing. Matthias and I are playing. We're not on West as much anymore, but I ran into this guy, and I don't know whether or not they ran into each other on a forum. It's very likely they started talking on a forum. I ran into this guy, and he's making a really interesting tool that I think you'd be interested in. That tool gives you the ability to facilitate trade using an off-server website.
Yeah.
Which, as soon as LOD comes out, and it's going to be out in a couple of months, is going to be the biggest benefit to you and me that could possibly exist. If he's successful in making this, you and I are going to dominate every server we play on without any question. But there's one obstacle. He's been working on his project for months in his spare time, where he's literally dissecting the client server code so that when you lift an item up, it sends this specific packet, 3B, 6F, whatever, 4 sets of 2 things. And one of those things is the coordinates, and one of them relates to the item type, and the rest relate to its mods. And it sends it back and forth to the server. He figured out how to translate that code into the actual items on a website. So people will be able to upload their gear and post it on a website and coordinate trades, and you can search it and imagine what it'll be like. Obviously, he's describing what eventually became Diablo.trade or whatever, right? It was the precursor for that. But the problem is that he's just a poor teenager working on this in his spare time while he goes to school.
Yeah.
And he's worried that all of the work that he's done is going to be obsolesced when the expansion comes out because there's all this new code coming into the game. What if there's new encryption with it also? If there's encryption, then all of the stuff that he's spent months figuring out is invalidated. He's going to have to start from square one. But he'd at least like to get an idea of what the client server code looks like in the expansion. Would you be willing to share your beta key with him, which I still have lying around? I went, that sounds like an awesome tool. He's welcome to it. And I sent it over immediately. And then another month or so passes, maybe 2, and LOD comes out
Yeah.
to much fanfare. And I take my first trembling steps into that game. And it is as magnificent as promised. What I realized quite quickly was that that post was stupid and short-sighted and hysterical. Because for the very first time I had dealt with power creep in a game.
Yeah.
Up to that point, every game that I had played generally didn't get patches and updates and stuff. You just bought the game and that was it. There was no power creep in Ultima 5 or whatever.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like the game was balanced and done,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't change. In World of Warcraft, for example, there's incremental power creep every single expansion that comes out, and everyone's just kind of used to that, right? So it's very acclimated. You understand that the mythic items, the mythic tier, insane elite gear that you were crushing mythic content with is obsolesced halfway through the quest chain in the expansion.
Yep.
And you don't expect to be able to move into like high level raids with your previous expansion gear and kill anything.
Right.
But I didn't know that. I had no frame of reference for that.
Yeah.
And that's really what had gone on. LODs, the items were just way better. The mods and the runes and the higher base types and stuff very quickly obsolesced all the classic gear. And within no time at all, I was very powerful again.
Yeah.
Crushing the content just fine. And I was applying all of the trading strategies that I'd worked on and playing solo and crushing the content and min-maxing it and so on. And after a couple of months, I had sick gear.
Yeah.
Really, really amazing stuff. You know, the stuff that I would show it in trade and stuff. And people would be in awe. Like, how on earth did you get those items? Really, really crazy shit. Anyway, one day I'm in a trade game. And I'm hanging out in this trade game. And these games would go on for hours. You basically would just say, you know, all come trade or something. And you'd walk in there and you just stand around. And people would come in and out. And they'd open up a trade screen. Everybody would kind of flash their wares on the screen.
So is this just like an instance that you all form agreeably to,
exactly.
to trade? Okay.
A public game based on trading. I don't know if this has ever existed in PoE, but I expect it has.
I think that before the trade interface, everyone was forced to trade by dropping items in the mud flats. I've heard tales and horror stories of
like
that.
walk far enough away that it's like trying to get to second base by stealing, and you're like, how far can
someone
I move?
Drops
where
the
I can
currency, someone drops the item. You both have to like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was in one of these trade games. Fortunately, we just had the trade screen.
Yeah.
And I click on this random guy, and he starts showing me these crazy ass items. Just unbelievable stuff. Really, really good uniques, a bunch of crazy rares. And we get to just chatting. And somehow in the conversation, I don't remember why I mentioned it, but I said who I was. Maybe I was honestly hoping that he was a Magic player and that his mind would be blown that he was talking to Brian Weissman.
Yeah.
He would be like more willing to trade with me or something. So I mentioned my name. And he goes, "Hi, my name is Chris. And a few months ago, you gave me your beta key for free. Nice to meet you." It was Chris Wilson.
Insane.
What a moment, right?
Yeah.
Your life has these forks in it. These people talk about the butterfly effect or whatever.
Yeah.
And maybe reality and our lives are all determined anyway. There's a lot of emergent thought in physics and cosmology on this idea of fate and destiny. But this is one of those sort of fated moments. Clearly had to meet, and we met under those circumstances. Chris, at the time, I think was 18 or 19 years old, and he had been an avid Magic player, not a collector, more of a player back then, because he's a very, very, very smart guy, and he's a way better Magic player than he gives himself credit for.
Yeah.
He had read about me in magazines and stuff, but New Zealand had, was really walled off from the rest of the world, particularly in the 1990s. Their internet, you used to have to pay for bandwidth, even when I started going out there.
Wow.
In like the mid 2000s, you had to pay by the megabyte and stuff. Their internet was really, really primitive. And he had played a ton of Magic, and he had read about me in articles. He had read my article in The Duelist, I think, and certainly read about me on the Usenet. And he was just as sort of starstruck and mind blown, as you'd expect given those circumstances. Suddenly he's having a conversation with this famous Magic the Gathering pro player who seems to just be totally genial and just hanging out in the game. We became instant friends. It was just like instantaneous clicking. And it wasn't even much later. I'm thinking it was late 2001, might have been 2002. Chris could certainly correct the record. But he made it, I believe, his first trip out to the West Coast. He came out while he was still going to university with his girlfriend, Vicky.
Yeah.
And he visited me where I was living in Davis, California, a little cottage. I remember him showing up in the parking lot or whatever. I think they came in on the train or whatever. And I'm like, I'm hanging out with Chris. This is crazy.
Wow. You can just communicate this meetup over Diablo II or over the internet chat?
All of it orchestrated through Diablo II. I mean, we emailed and stuff, but I mean, we didn't talk on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so amazing to hang out with the guy. I mean, anybody that's hung out around Chris knows just how special he really is.
Yeah.
And we saw eye to eye on nearly everything that we talked about. And most of what we talked about was Diablo II, much to the horror of our respective girlfriends.
You guys are just nerding out.
Yeah. I mean, all we wanted to do was just talk shop and talk about the game. And Chris, I think at that time, I think he had kind of abandoned his project. I think it was just taking too much time. And there really wasn't any reason to make it. It had kind of just been something to tinker and work around on. And he had just had more important things to focus on, like his education.
For the trade site, you mean?
Yeah. And I mean, there was just so many things going on in the world. This is like the big .com boom time and stuff. I was very interested in investing, actually.
Yeah.
And because it seemed like you could just print money investing in literally anything at the time.
Yeah.
As long as you didn't invest in pets.com or some ridiculous ideas.
Right.
And all the Magic players at the time who still talked, all the pros and everything, everyone was super savvy about all this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, everyone plugged in. So there was a lot to be learned. One of the greatest Magic players of all time, if not the guy widely considered the GOAT, John Finkel. John Finkel went from his pro career and started a hedge fund in New York City that manages billions of dollars in equity. And a bunch of other Magic players have made vast fortunes in investment. Because, you know, fundamentally what we did as high-end Magic players was tinker with math and behavior. Sure, those two things. And we were very, very good at mastering all of it. So Chris and I hung out for a wild week. And then he went back to New Zealand. And we talked increasingly. I think we actually, we did start talking on the phone. You couldn't really talk on the internet. So I think we just had occasional phone calls.
Yeah.
But we talked a lot in the context of Diablo. We were both just min-maxing the hell out of the game. And somewhere in there, and I'm sure that Erik had a part of this too, we started kind of discussing the prospect of making our own version of this. And the reason we started really having serious conversations about that was because I think around 2003 or 2004, screenshots started to leak out from the Irvine team, the guys that were originally called Blizzard North, who had been moved from Blizzard North down to Irvine. And they were hard at work making Diablo 2's sequel, Diablo 3. And screenshots were coming out about it and stuff. And we were following it with bated breath, right? Another huge opportunity for the most fun you're ever going to have in your life.
Exactly.
We couldn't wait to repeat the whole process. You know, forget about a ladder reset. This was a whole new game. And just as a thought exercise through that whole period, we would have many conversations. Chris and I, Chris used to run avidly. He's an avid runner. He got really, really inspired actually by my own running kind of career. I competed as a competitive distance runner in high school.
Okay.
At one point, I was captain of the cross country and track teams as the distance captain. And I ran a 2 mile under 10 minutes my senior year in high school, which is a pretty sick in retrospect. I mean, there's a girl just ran 9:17 in the 2 miles. So, you know, times have changed a little bit, but back then I was about as fast as the fastest girl in the country, which was pretty cool. The guys were way better than me, of course. But compared to Chris, you know, Chris looked up to my running ability and really admired it. And so he started running himself. And we used to go on long runs together where we'd run for, you know, a solid 20 minutes and then stop and walk for 10 minutes and talk and run again. And we would talk about Diablo and about maybe what a future Diablo might look like. And then in 2005, huge news through the entire ARPG space. Diablo 3 has been canceled. And all of the Blizzard North guys, the geniuses who made Diablo 1 and Diablo 2 have been pulled off the project. And it's basically being rebooted from scratch. And I think that was the moment when we really realized, you know what? It's incumbent on us to do this. We need to solve this problem. because Diablo is now 6 years old, and as good as this game was, as genius as it was, it's showing its age in a lot of different ways. And there's many. I talked about the giant stew, right? The huge melting pot of all the mechanics in the game. By 2006 or whatever, 2005, we'd pretty much figured out what the secret sauce was. At least we had a pretty solid understanding of what it was, and we also knew what things were vestigial, which things could be trimmed out of the project.
Yeah.
To streamline it. For example, Diablo II has stamina in it.
Yeah, the stamina bar.
Does stamina really belong in an ARPG? It only really matters at the very beginning.
I think that's one of their biggest design like mistakes. It was the stamina.
You're trying to play this game, and the very first thing you're doing is constantly toggling walk and run.
Yeah.
In the first zone, because you can't run from the monsters. Now you're just walking around like an idiot.
Yeah.
It's like thematically it works, flavor-wise it works, but it's not. It's unfun complexity. You know what I mean? It doesn't need to be in the game, so we got rid of that. Yeah. Their potion system was extremely annoying and cumbersome. The fact that your inventory is so precious, you have to fill your inventory full of crap.
Yeah.
And it got way worse in Lord of Destruction because of a design decision they made, which was fun mechanically for a while, but eventually felt mandatory and completely confined your inventory. Anybody who's played Resurrected knows what I'm talking about. Charms. The idea that you have to carry these items in your inventory that feel mandatory because they augment your build, particularly if you're doing PvP, but even if you're doing PvE, because you just don't want to be weaker.
Right.
So you have to fill up your whole inventory with a bunch of charms. You don't have any room to pick anything up anymore.
Yeah.
So we knew we weren't going to put charms into Path of Exile. Like no way are charms. And as far as potions are concerned, this is a really interesting design space. And what's in D2 is very rudimentary. We can dig deeper into this. It's a lot of emergent design. We can innovate. What about flasks? What about this idea that you have a belt of potions that refill not from having to go back to town or to buy them again, but just are incrementally filling as you kill monsters and do what you're meant to do.
Yeah.
We actually originally had the idea of using wells in the game too. And there is a well in PoE 2, I noticed.
Yep.
You refill in when you go back into town. So that's a little bit of like the old school idea. We were going to have wells. In fact, there are assets in the early version of PoE 2 that were wells.
Okay.
So you'd run around in the maze killing monsters. Yeah, you've probably seen them.
Yeah.
So that was our initial fix. And then we realized, you know what? It's just not that fun. It's not fun having to click on it, find a thing and click on it. It's just extra busy work.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't we just reward you for doing the thing you're already kind of meant to do anyway? And the current modern flask system was born. And then the idea of using them as a tool belt, that they have extra abilities and mods attached to them, kind of grew out of that.
Yeah.
By 2006, a bunch of things were all kind of lining up. The stars were aligning. Chris was out of university. Jonathan was also graduated. They were a little bit apart and they had met at university. And I didn't know Jonathan at all.
Yeah.
But Chris and Jonathan had been friends in college. They were very, very close friends. I had visited New Zealand one time at that point. I came out in 2005 when Chris was still living on campus. And I stayed with him for about a week. And that was my first trip to New Zealand.
Okay.
And we hung out and talked shop the whole time. I probably met Jonathan on that trip, although I don't recall.
Right.
But he seemed like a very impressive guy. He was very, very confident about his ability to do probably what was the hardest thing of all about our project, which was designing the game engine from scratch.
Yeah.
I mean, and to write a game engine for a game without all of the modern tools, he had to code it, I believe, in C++ or whatever. And I'm sure if there's coders in the audience right now, they're cringing, going, no, it wouldn't be C++. It's 2006. Forgive me, I'm not a programmer. But either way, he had to code it from scratch, literally learning it on the fly from a manual on his desk in front of him.
Wow.
He began to make the first little baby steps writing the game engine. We had no idea what it was going to look like, but we did have Erik, because Erik had decided, as a part of our friend group in Diablo II, and as the guy that really brought the artistic vision to the table,
yeah,
that Erik really wanted to do the world building. He wanted to sculpt the game's visual aesthetic, right? One of the most important things about any game product ever. What does it look like?
Definitely.
And inspired by Diablo II, we wanted to make it, that grimdark style, that gothic style, and very adult oriented. We wanted to have blood and gore and nudity whenever possible.
Yeah.
You remember like the little mana and life globes? They had a like topless woman draped around the glass. Definitely Erik's concept art.
Yeah.
We were going to make a serious adult hardcore game for hardcore gamers. In fact, I need to go get something right now.
Sure.
So this is going to be a little quick cut
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
going to have to make.
That's fine.
I'm going to go get something from downstairs that I want to show you and the audience.
Okay.
So I'll be right back.
Sounds good.
Large lettering on this thing.
Oh my.
One of a kind.
Was that at a show that you guys went to preview it?
2011.
Oh my gosh. That's awesome.
This sign we paid an exorbitant amount of money to be hung above our hats, and you had to pay a bunch of money to take it down also.
Yeah.
It is one of a kind. I had it hanging on my wall because as the cat, well, I mean, it's the only American on the team really, and the fact that I live in Seattle.
Right.
Once we packed up everything, there was really no place for this to go. So it says hardcore.
Hardcore action RPG.
Hardcore action RPG.
With a free beta DVD? You guys are giving away DVDs?
I'll tell you all about that. But I just wanted to show that sign off.
That's amazing.
So we really were trying to make we wanted to make a game that felt hardcore, that felt adult and real and visceral. We wanted to embody all of the central things that we knew were part of that secret sauce in D2. Because D2 captivated you on all of these neurological levels that you weren't even necessarily aware of.
Mm-hmm.
It just felt so good to play because so much of this stuff was done correctly.
Yeah.
In 2006, we were ready to begin initial design of what at that point we felt was really Diablo II's spiritual successor. That was the goal. If Blizzard is going to cancel Diablo 3 and they're going to lay off the entire staff that made the game that we think is the best,
right,
we're going to make that game instead. Problem exists to solve. And there's this niche. And we had, fortunately, as a consequence of all of the financial things that had happened in that era, we had the resources to do it too, both internally and externally. I had a lot of people at that point who I had talked to who had substantial amounts of money through the Magic ecosystem, and some of them were willing to gamble on what we were going to do. They certainly understood the deficit too. A lot of them were Diablo players also.
Yeah.
You know, it's like there was enough intercommunication between people that were playing the game by the mid 2000s. You know, the internet had evolved a ton. So it was very, very easy to network among people who trusted you and so on.
Right.
So we knew that we could do it. At least we could put enough time and energy and resources into it that we could make something that we wouldn't be embarrassed by. Although, what a Herculean task, right? You know that Blizzard isn't just going to abandon the Diablo IP. It's too valuable and too famous. They are going to make a sequel. It's just a matter of when does that sequel come out and what does it look like.
Yeah.
But we're pretty sure that based on reading the tea leaves, and Blizzard's by far most successful product at that point, by probably an order of magnitude, was World of Warcraft, which was a couple years old by then. And World of Warcraft had a very specific kind of look and tone to it. You know, it's the same idea. Like in Hearthstone, you see people that nerd rage over the game. I've had people lose a game of Hearthstone to me and spam me for an hour with hatred. Venom and stuff.
Well, first they have to friend request you so they can message you, and then they spew hatred.
You know when you're getting a friend request, not for a GG.
Yep.
So someone can whine about something, right?
Yeah.
Which is so ridiculous because the game is so it's very kid-like.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be fun and irreverent. You know, it's got cool tavern music and stuff. It's not serious and hardcore.
Right.
And yet people still treat it that way. So we're pretty sure that Blizzard wasn't going to make Diablo 3 hardcore. They just weren't interested in making. Probably just didn't believe that would be the tone of the game. And lo and behold, when they started to show actual images of its revamp, it looked cartoony by comparison.
Yeah,
it really did. It had a totally different color palette. All of that darkness had been pulled out of it. Very flashy, bright pastel colors and stuff. It was nothing like what they were working on before, and nothing like our vision for Diablo's successor.
Right.
And that was extremely validating, actually, because we realized we had guessed correctly. There was room in the marketplace for a game like Diablo II again. And there had been a bunch of other games that had been made around that time in the mid 2000s that were Titan Quest is one that immediately comes to mind. I guess Grim Dawn was released later, although it took forever to develop. More recently, last Epoch, there was a game called Van Helsing that got played in there. I don't remember when any of these games came out, but they all kind of fall on my PoE development time radar.
Yeah.
All of those games, without exception, were client-side games, just like Diablo I. So they didn't solve that problem either. And part of that reason probably was because they didn't have someone like Jonathan to write all the netcode from scratch.
Right.
How insane is that? He wrote all of Path of Exile's netcode for client-server communication with a predictive model, predicting what was going to happen next. He did that all by himself. Insane. Totally insane, monumental feat that none of us could have even ever hoped to match. Chris included, I believe. Even though Chris was a great programmer, Erik and I couldn't program ourselves out of a paper bag.
You guys were the designers. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Erik was the visual lead. And in terms of core design, my recollection is that a big majority of the core design came from Chris's and my brain trust over the years, and we talked about tons of things. There were original ideas that made their way into the game quite early on. For example, the passive tree, and the way the passive tree works is... Oh, no, I take that back. It's not the passive tree, actually. It's the gem system.
Okay.
The idea of having skill gem plus supports that link together to it to augment it and make it more powerful, as best I understand, although I never played the game, is that it's a retread of the materia system from Final Fantasy, which I know Jonathan played it. I don't know if Chris played it. I definitely didn't play Final Fantasy. I was just busy playing other games.
Yeah,
so
I
the
never did
materia,
really either.
I believe from Final Fantasy VII.
Okay.
Is where the materia system arrives. And that was the system that we co-opted to handle how gems worked. One of sort of PoE's many strokes of genius, although it's been changed dramatically in PoE too.
Yeah.
Not sure if it's better. To be determined.
It's more usable. Yeah, it's more user-friendly, that's for sure.
Certainly more useful, but I mean,
Yeah.
we'll talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, I'm going to object to this, so I'll just tell you how I feel about
Definitely.
it. I don't have skin in the game either way.
Yeah.
But so that, I believe, was one of Jonathan's main innovations that I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Erik was busy kind of just doing the flavor creative stuff. He wanted to come up with a plot for the game. And so for the first good while, once we were really moving forward with the project, the plot was very unformed. Erik had this idea that there was a ancient cataclysm that took place on wherever the game was taking place. And I don't believe the land was called Rayclast yet. In fact, I believe Rayclast just means literally Path of Exile.
Really?
In the native tongue, yeah. So you can't call your land Rayclast until you've decided the game is called Path of Exile. And it had a bunch of different names. We were experimenting with names. I actually had, for me, the front runner of what I wanted to call the game was one word. And I don't know, people in the audience, will they wince or will they kind of like nod and go, huh? It probably just depends on how you view this word. I wanted to call the game Maroon. Maroon.
Okay.
Just one word, maroon. Because that's what you are as an exile. That was sort of the chief thrust of the game. What is it like to be marooned in a savage, untamed land where you have nothing?
Yeah.
Another name for the game was One with Nothing, which I think has made it around.
Yeah.
OWN. It does have a very cool acronym.
Yeah.
One with Nothing. I think that might have been Chris's idea. And I don't know where Path of Exile came from. My guess is that Erik may have come up with it.
It was speculated in, so this was my sleuthing for you, like deep within the Reddit threads, it was speculated that within the Lords of Destruction lore, there's actually a path of exile that you follow on your journey or something, and that's where it was speculated that the name came from. I don't know how much truth that has.
Doesn't ring a bell to me, but it's possible.
Yeah.
Certainly. I'll have to ask Chris.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure he remembers it. Either way, we kind of started, I think we landed on that name pretty quickly, maybe by 2007. But prior to that, we had our first actual kind of sit-down design meeting. I remember it very vividly. We were in Chris's garage in Newland, New Zealand. And we're hanging out in his garage, and it's finally time. We've been probably just gaming and chatting all afternoon. normally do. And it's, okay, we got to buckle down and design some skills, guys. Let's roll up the whiteboard.
Mm-hmm.
We sit there with a pen and we start designing PoE's first skills. I think the very first skill that was designed was Bash.
Okay.
Just the Marauder skill, though he wasn't called the Marauder at that point.
Yeah.
But Bash is a skill in Diablo II. It's a good, like, one-handed skill that you can, and it has knockback, right? Which is kind of an interesting mechanic.
Yeah.
And in that first afternoon, we probably designed a handful of things and just talked about a million ideas. And then for the next couple of years, things kind of just crawled along. There was so much foundational stuff that had to be done.
Yeah.
For one, Jonathan had to work on the engine. He had to build the engine. And Erik had to create the concept art and the original drawings and stuff to at least populate Jonathan's emergent engine with assets. Erik was also thinking about the plot. He and I spent a lot of time chatting about it. And eventually I said, okay, tell you what, I'm going to write the game's plot because I'm not satisfied with what you guys have come up with. They had this idea of this cataclysm and stuff, but I said, guys, fundamentally, we need an antagonist.
Mm-hmm.
You need a villain. Like this, it can't just be this vague bad thing that happened. We need an origin point for it.
Right.
And coincidentally, right around the time, I had seen this movie it was a horror film that came out called Slither.
Okay.
I think it came out in 2007 or something, 2006. And it's a very, very good horror film. It's excellent. It's really well done. Slither is kind of imagines what would it have been like if it from the movie, or I'm sorry, not it, The Thing. If the creature from The Thing, instead of crash landing in the Arctic and being discovered by an expedition team there, what if it had landed in just random rural United States Midwest somewhere?
Yeah.
And in the story, the main character, who's basically like the mayor of this small town, he and his girlfriend, he's having an affair. They're out in the woods, and this meteorite crashes in front of them. They walk up to inspect it, and the meteorite injects something into the guy's abdomen. And he doesn't know what it is. He seems to be okay. The two of them go back to continue their affair at his house, and while they're having sex, the thing that's in him gets into her. Then she becomes a big incubator for this extraterrestrial entity's babies.
Yeah.
That actually swell her up to gigantic. It's awesome and grotesque. And it got me thinking about, well, I think actually what I was really thinking about was that we have this skill gem system, right? Game has skill gems all over the ground. I actually watched a video that was talking about at PoE's lore, and it kind of got this right, but not completely.
Yeah.
But basically, I was thinking, what are these skill gems? Why do they matter? Why do they have power? Because we're sort of steeped in the real world. There is obviously magic, but the magic is tied into the gems themselves. Why do the gems give you abilities?
Yeah.
And so I thought, what would be cool? What if there was some sort of ancient creature, whether it was extraterrestrial or just old, slumbering deep in the ground, recovering maybe from some kind of awful calamity that birthed it, whether it came from the stars or it was born from the ground or whatever.
Yeah.
The creature is slumbering and has been slumbering for eons, millions of years, but it's bleeding the whole time. It's bleeding its essence out into the groundwater. And its essence is green and blue and red, 3 different ichors or whatever, spreading out and fossilizing and crystallizing and then making their way through geological activity and erosion and the basic movement of water out into the ecosystem. So that when a population of colonists began to arrive on this continent, and I'm not sure if the original idea was that they were essentially natives or whether or not they were people that were being brought over from what became Orioth,
right?
Whether they were exiles in the first place.
Yeah.
They encounter these gems and they're like, what are these things? They start screwing around with them. They hum and resonate with energy. They have something going on inside of them, even though at this point they're petrified. They're like chunks of amber and they're fossilized pieces of this creature's blood.
Yeah.
Eventually they discovered that maybe through pure accident, that if you somehow get them in deep contact with your skin, they give you weird powers. And then they set forth trying to harness this energy, which is explored extensively in this book right here that Erik had commissioned.
Oh, the comic. Yeah.
Path of Exile, Origins, an amazing graphic novel that tells about PoE's prehistory, which is honestly an amalgamation of 3 different people's contributions, primarily. Erik's, my own, and our main writer, Edwin McCrae.
Edwin, yeah.
Yeah, Edwin. So that was my idea. That's explained the skill gems. And invariably, the people that had mastery of the skill gems after a while started to try to utilize them for the very same thing that all powerful imperial people and aristocratic people, monarchs, eventually wind up using all their resources for, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have one life, but life is finite. Figure out a way to be immortal.
Yep.
The motivation for the pyramids, right? And countless other tombs and stuff.
Yeah.
So they started experimenting with the gems, trying to figure out how to use them to harness their energy to make, because they noticed that they did make the things that they were inserted in more, they just had more vitality. Maybe there's a way to use these gemstones to make people immortal.
Yeah.
And this book explores that sort of origin story.
Nice.
But the problem is that the main court magician, the main court chemist, it's Malachi in this story.
Yeah.
He didn't have a name at the time, but the idea was that they dug too deep and too greedily, essentially, to quote Gandalf from Lord of the Rings. And in the process, they began to directly communicate with this entity, and they woke it up.
Nice.
And the first thing that it did was send out a giant psychic wave, a giant psychic shockwave that destroyed, incinerated the minds and the bodies of most of the people living on the continent and blighted the land. So the blight that infuses Ray class, the reason why there's Walking Dead and all these weird mutated creatures like the blood apes and stuff,
Yeah.
all of that stuff owes to this event. It's called the twist in this book. That's what they called it. But Erik's idea is that it was just the cataclysm.
Yeah.
So that was the origin point of the cataclysm in my story.
Nice.
And that's about as far as I took that. And then when Edwin came on board to start writing our dialogue, once we were really populating the towns and stuff and making NPCs, and
Yeah.
I had one of my early writing tasks was writing up the introductory things that the characters say when you select them in the original character select screen. We talked about it in the last video.
Yeah,
And I talked about how the dialogue for the duelist was. I wrote all of the original ones, all 6 of them. And Edwin did a better job. He took what I wrote and condensed it and made it sound more colloquial, which was important. And he changed the tones too. But the sort of central themes are still there. For example, the Templar. The first thing that the Templar says when he spawns on the beach in the Twilight Strand, he says, "My dreams, they were prophecy."
Yeah.
And it relates to the story. It's the reason why the Templar was exiled in the first place. He was a heretic. He was explaining to the Templar order on Orioth that there had been consequences for all the people that they were just shunting off to Rayclass.
Yeah.
And that there was a brewing calamity there. That there was something very bad was going to happen. He was having horrible dreams about it. And what did they do? Instead of going like, we should take a look at that. They just exiled him.
Yeah.
Get rid of the guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the witch was exiled for people burning her house and her taking their children. That was something that I wrote initially.
Yeah.
And a little too dark, so Edwin tempered that a bit. But we also had to come up, for example, with the names of the classes. And we talked about that for months, brainstorming about what names sounded cool. And I don't remember who named what. I know, for example, that Erik really wanted to call the character that eventually became the Shadow. The Shadow was the last character that we named officially. The Dex Int hybrid.
Yeah.
Erik wanted to call him the Trickster.
Okay.
That was Erik's idea for him. But I think Erik is a Swede, and English is not his first language. No fault of his, right?
Yeah.
But the idea of what a trickster is sounds, I think, different to his ear than it does, say, to mine. And it wasn't really quite the right fit. His idea is that the guy was sort of a weird experimental kind of tinkerer and so on.
Yeah.
And he made potions and chemicals and concoctions and so on. But ultimately, Shadow just felt better in terms of incorporating what that was. The Marauder, I believe I named the Marauder, and it always seemed like he was going to be the Marauder for quite a while, the big, beefy Maori guy.
Yeah.
Which was a nice little homage to New Zealand anyway.
Definitely, yeah.
The duelist, for the longest time, I wanted to call the Corsair rather than the duelist.
Mm-hmm.
The embodiment of, if you think about what a Corsair is, you had to be very dexterous and also very strong and good at fighting to be a Corsair.
Right.
Like at any moment, you might be fighting with a cutlass for your life on a heaving, burning ship or something, right?
Exactly,
What an
yeah.
embodiment of ideas. Eventually, that got turned into the duelist. The witch, I think, was always called the witch.
Mm-hmm.
The ranger, pretty early on, also called the ranger. And we had the Templar, of course. That was decided pretty early on. I don't think there was really any much debate about any of those things. And then the class that eventually became the Scion, I think was also called the Scion pretty early on. We
Yeah.
wanted this kind of jack of all trades character that you would unlock, but it took a little while to actually make her. And one interesting kind of note, there's a very different graphical aesthetic between the 6 core characters and the Scion.
Mm-hmm.
Why does the Scion look so different? You think about how the Ranger and the Witch are almost asexual in terms of how they're presented.
Yeah.
The witch is she's sort of slumped over and she's wearing like a burlap sack.
Yeah.
She's clearly feminine. She speaks in a soft voice, but there's no attempt to make her sexy.
Right.
And the ranger has, like a crew cut. She's very masculine looking.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Scion is dressed like a cosplay girl. Why is that? It's because Erik didn't design her visual aesthetic. We had I believe, and I hope I'm not getting this wrong, but we had hired one of our very first overseas hire at that point, a woman from South Korea who's a fantastic artist, and she drew all of the art from concept to execution of the Scion. So that was the first character that wasn't illustrated by Erik, and that's why that character is so different looking.
Okay.
Pretty cool. She was originally part of the design. We knew we were going to make her because we had the 3 core strength, dex, int to represent the 3 colors, and then we had the 3 hybrids.
Yeah.
And that was pretty straightforward design. It was decided very early on that that's what we were going to do. And then it was just a matter of building out the game. One of the things that you do once you have established the plot, and we had this pretty good workable plot. I always thought the plot was fine. I didn't think it was particularly innovative or anything, but it was good enough. It was serviceable for the story that we wanted to tell, and we could have kind of creepy elements and stuff, things that were unknown, that we could meet out through little flavor bits and through some of the dialogue that the NPCs and the enemies would have without really thrusting it in your face.
Right.
We always wanted the exposition in Path of Exile to kind of be something was optional, that you could engage with in the background. And that became particularly true after we all played Diablo III when it came out in 2012, where in that game, you are forced on rails to go through all of the exposition over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Big, giant, floating head, blah, 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 that talks to you after something happens.
Yep.
We were not going to do any of that stuff. No reason to do it at all. And I took intermittent trips to New Zealand. I think I was going there once or twice a year after 2006, going to the studio. And the studio transitioned from being Chris's garage for a year and a half or so to the very first studio that we occupied, which was originally, it was part of, I think, a 5 office space building in Titirangi, New Zealand, right next door to what I can only describe as a crazy duck lady. There's this woman that just had an affinity for ducks and geese.
Yeah.
And even though the town council told her repeatedly that she had to stop, she put out food all the time. And eventually she had a gigantic menagerie of waterfowl.
Yeah.
Over 100 of them. They were all over the place, quacking endlessly.
Mm-hmm.
And making duck shit all over the place, too. It was all over the parking lot, and it smelled like that office, my God. So many flies. There were flies everywhere because of the duck lady.
Yeah.
There's a constant fly problem. They're everywhere. And we set up shop in this middle office, initially probably only with about 6 or 7 developers. And at the time, I was the primary executive producer of the project. Chris was also contributing quite a bit.
Yeah.
2 of us. And Erik and Jonathan were working as equity partners. And, were contributing invaluable things at the time.
Yeah.
So we were able to hire a reasonable staff. We got 5-6 people cobbled together, added to the team. And we had our first sysadmin, I believe a guy named Dylan, who was writing the first website, coding the actual first website from scratch.
Awesome. Yeah.
We had some people who would be very familiar to people who've been following the company for a long time. Severn was an early hire to do art. Reese and Rory came in quite early as well. I remember them in the first like 10 or so hires, I think.
Yeah.
We had Carl came on pretty early on as well. And Carl hasn't been with the company for a long time, but Carl is there. And he was there as one of our kind of main designers. And everybody that kind of worked on the project at that point in time was a bit of a kind of jack of all trades to an extent, unless you were hyper specialized head down like Jonathan was, just writing the engine.
Right.
Infinite amount of work. Chris and I worked on design. We talked about it all the time. We went every time I was in New Zealand, and even when I was here, we talked about. I mean, there's a million things to create in balance. We go on long walks and talks and runs talking about it. At one point, I think it was 2008 or 2009, his fitness peaked when he ran. I paced him through a mile on a track in under 6 minutes.
Wow.
He ran like a 5:51 mile.
That's insane, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And Chris did not have a background as a runner. The guy is just so tenacious when he puts his mind to things.
Yeah.
Unbelievably tenacious. He ran half marathons at one point. He was training and running all the time.
Wow.
Before the success of the game and the growth of the game really took over his life, and he had to leave that stuff behind.
Yeah.
But I did personally all these different things. At one point on one of the trips, I remember we had just got a bunch of sound files from the sound person. And I was sitting there going through this giant library of sounds, just listening to everything, being like, what would that be good for?
Yeah.
Because some of them were supposed to be associated with certain monster types. So, for example, I had a library of zombie sounds, but they were all kind of like, oh,
yeah.
They just weren't good zombie sounds. They were kind of like, we wanted like snarling, sounds like that. You wanted creepy 28 Days Later songs.
Right.
Not the ones from the movies in the 1950s and stuff, the Day of the Dead zombies. So I had to throw all those away. One of them there was one sound in there I remember very specifically that wound up, I don't remember what it was for. I think it was a scavenger sound originally, but it wound up being one of the main sounds for the Goatman. It sounded just like a Goatman sound.
Yeah.
It was like an incredible Goatman sound, but it was actually supposed to be for the scavengers. And I worked on that for a while. But ultimately, it would sort of seem like it was something that needed to be done by a person who could manipulate and work with the sound files. There was more work that needed to be done there. My chief contributions after a relatively short period of time played to my strengths and my very extensive background as a kind of fantasy/sci-fi nerd who had cut his teeth on scores of different RPGs over the years.
Yeah.
And remembered I had the kind of emotional, muscular ideas of it's almost like a synesthetic relationship to it. I had a very, very deep sense of what words sounded good in that context to describe things. One quality of my brain in general is that I have a very, very musical mind. My mind is all about syncopation and rhythm. And I sing all the time, and music is a sort of pervasive thing in my mind. I'm constantly hearing music in my head. It's just a matter of whether or not I try to whistle or sing along to it. And part of that is that I have an idea, a very good sense of poetic syncopation and meter and cadence and stuff. It's very hard coded into how my mind works.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff that I wrote in the early part of the game embodies those qualities, shows up in different places, actually. And an example of that is some of the dialogue, a bunch of the flavor text that I wrote for early unique items. Because we decided pretty early on that like magic cards, we wanted to have flavor text on uniques to make them more kind of compelling and interesting.
Yeah.
And we wanted the flavor text to be exciting and memorable.
Yeah.
And epic, exactly. Eventually, you reach a saturation point. If you're cranking out millions of uniques anyway, it's very, very hard to keep making interesting, compelling poems.
Right.
But I wrote a bunch of poems for some of the game's first items. I'll quote a couple.
Yeah, give me your top 3.
My top 3. I think my favorite is probably Midnight Bargain, although I've since amended one of the words in it. I found just a better word later and kicked myself for it.
Yeah.
maybe there's a way to like retcon this and change them all server side. But it was Midnight Bargain is a necromancy scepter. It's supposed to be good for necromancers. So I told a story of what it would be like to command an undead horde as the wielder of this weapon. A chilling hush, a scraping sound of things no more entombed in ground. A shambling horde is on its way, snuff the very light of day. That was the poem that I wrote for that.
Yeah.
The word that I used instead of snuff, unfortunately, was crush, which isn't as good.
To crush the light of day.
Yeah, just a little bit too abstract.
Well, the horde is going to be crushing it. Yeah, I see what I see where you're going. Yeah.
Snuff the very light of day, because snuffing out light is something you do anyway. Crush. Sense. Another one that I really liked, which I actually was handed by Erik when he had tinkered around with it, was the flavor text for Death's Harp.
Oh, I love that bow.
Amazing bow, right? Very, very powerful starter item. And eventually, I guess it got an upgrade in the sense that you could put it on a higher base.
Yeah.
So it's still more effective. It was a very, very good bow when the game first came out. Nowadays, it's, it's a one elk.
Right. One C, one elk. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But at the time, it was very good. And so it had a poem that befitted that. It was the mournful music of the strings, the creaking arch, the arrow sings, choking cry, a rattled breath, the reaper's song, the harp of death. So that was, I think, a pretty cool epic poem to accompany. But it doesn't quite live up to the epic reputation. And I think maybe my third one is the shield. I think it's called Tutusius, maybe.
Tutusius, yeah. Bargain? What was it? Yes.
Span,
yeah.
The word I use. Tutusius' span, the idea of this big, giant shield that protects you from projectiles, was sort of the design of it. And it was a mighty bulwark, curved and strong, a dauntless wall against the throng. All lance and arrow knocked aside, for rout of foe, for turn of tide. Which I thought was suitably epic for what that shield was meant to do.
So you just sat down and wrote all of these?
Yeah.
Nice.
There's a ton of them in the game. So this is a strength of mine that I did. Also, we knew pretty early on, getting back to that poster over there, when we showed the game for the first time in 2011 to the broader public, we exhibited it at the Penny Arcade Expo here in Seattle. The passive tree was populated entirely with stats, I believe. Just attributes, which is honestly really boring.
Yeah.
Just not really that mechanically interesting after a point. There's nothing to chase, really.
Was it as large back then as it is now still? Or?
I don't believe it was near as big. Yeah. It was big, but it wasn't enormous.
Yeah.
And it didn't really have anything interesting in it. It was just stats.
Right.
And I don't remember if we had probably already decided that it needed work. And we definitely got that feedback when we exhibited the game. People are kind of looking at it looking around. You'd see them lose interest in it very quickly. They just kind of get what it does, and then they'd move on. And one of the very first things that we decided to add to that, before we did the notables, which I also was in charge of naming and doing all the flavor for later, were the keystones.
Yeah.
These build defining kind of, well, they were like anchor points for your build, right? They were aspirational and they were build defining. Our initial idea was to have the unique items take the role of being build defining in the same way they were in Diablo II.
Yeah.
For example, there's a unique item called Ice Blink in Diablo II that allows you to, all your physical hits, freeze the enemies. So you can do things that synergize with freezing and build your build around Ice Blink. So we initially thought the uniques were going to do that. Eventually we realized the keystones would be a really good way to do that too. There's a lot of design space. But the keystones needed naming and they also needed flavor. So I named all the keystones and gave them all their flavor text as well.
Wow.
And what's pretty awesome is that those are still in PoE 2. I noticed that when I was on the passive tree. I was showing it to my son Des, and I'm just like, hey, look at
I'm sure there's a bunch of new ones, but the ones that you named still exist to this day. Which ones of those are your favorite, would you say?
The ones that are carried. Oh, man. I don't know if it's still in there, but it's the flavor text for the keystone that allows you to have 2 totems, I think, instead of just 1.
Okay. I don't know the name of it off the top of my head. Something ancestral.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
Yeah.
Yeah, ancestral totem. Anyway, it was a wooden construct, mute and blind, but fear the wrath of shackled mind. It's like talking about what it does to you, right? It affects your character in some way that has to do with your spellcasting or mana or something like that.
I think you don't do any damage, but you get an extra totem or something. Like you're literally sacrificing all of your strength to give it to your totems. Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So the idea, I figured that it's sort of like shackling all of your, in order to create a second totem, it occupies all of your mind.
That's awesome.
All of your bandwidth. You lose the ability to do this sort of thing. And literally every keystone I named. Eventually, a few years later, when we started to put notables into the game, I think we haven't discussed this mechanically, but it actually relates in a broader sense to people who might be aspirant game designers. So I kind of wanted, it's worth talking about for a second, about how they came to be. But we noticed pretty early on with PoE that a lot of people would play the game and they would pick up the items and they could understand what the items did on a fundamental level. Certainly, one of the things that I insisted we put into the game mechanically, even though it wasn't in Diablo II, but as soon as I suggested it to Chris, he's like, yeah, let's code that and see how it looks. The idea that you could look at your DPS, you can audit your DPS. The original game did not have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
And I emphatically insisted that we at least try that out, because people are going to want to be able to know, like, does this thing actually make me better? In Diablo, much harder to tell, actually.
Yeah.
You get a calculation, but it's not very accurate. There's so many other things included in it. So on the subject of notables, why are they in the game? Why are they so important?
Yeah.
And the thing is that people can understand the basic systems in the game, even if they haven't played an ARPG before. Although, it's hard. It's hard to figure out what's good, and you make lots of mistakes. But at a certain point, people would play the game. They'd level up a few times. They get a skill point, right? A lot of people have those big kind of viral aha moments where they click, oh, skill, cool. And a giant tree, well, the tree opens up on their character. And for a minute, they look at that and they go, oh my God, think of the possibilities. Wait, the little threads go off the screen. What if oh my God.
And they scroll out. Yeah.
No, exactly. There were so many reaction videos to that when the game first started to kind of make the rounds.
Yeah.
And it was one of the biggest viral selling points of the project in the first place. But the problem is that if you're not a gigabrain, if you're not a really experienced gamer, you're someone like my wife, for example, who has played Mario Kart recently and Oregon Trail as a kid and not too many games in between. You look at that and you go, I have no idea what to do.
Yeah.
Zero idea. I just see a bunch of random things that do stuff and I don't know what matters. And it's very evident to me in this context that unwinding a decision has a consequence. There's these currencies called regret orbs that I heard about or whatever. If there's regret, then if I make a choice I don't like, I'm going to feel regret. I don't like to feel regret.
Yeah.
And because that's the natural impulse and because regret orbs seem to be scarce, people didn't assign skills. They would just accumulate them, building up in the corner.
Yeah.
7, 8, 10, 9, 15 passive
It's
points.
a scary near permanent choice. Yeah.
Scary near permanent choice. So how on earth do you get people to break out of that mold? How do you train them to actually utilize the skill points? Because people will be tenacious. They'll grind all the way up to like level 30 with no skills until eventually they're just beating their head endlessly against the monsters and just dying.
Right.
Notables is how you solve that problem. You introduce these little, very obviously powerful salient nodes in the tree, and you name them cool things, and they're an enticement for people to journey to that spot.
Yeah.
You put a thing 3 spaces out, part of the gladiator or whatever, that has 4 different abilities attached to it, and they all seem great. There's no obvious downside. You've solved the problem. You just spread those out through the whole map, and now you're kind of gently holding their hand to make those initial choices. It's very obvious. I know I want Heart of the Gladiator. I guess, yeah, okay, I'll take attack speed, and maybe I'll take some strength here or whatever, and they get it. And then there's this big dopamine hit. You see the number go up. Now you're killing stuff twice the speed and so on. Now you've kind of ingrained that behavior. So the keystones needed to be in the game and they needed to be fun and flavorful. So I got charged with that task. I wrote the names of all the keystones in the game. And that includes the keystone called beef.
Beef. That's definitely a
For
favorite.
example, I remember writing, I was just doing the names of them. I'm like, what if I call this one beef? And I think it's like 30 strength or something.
Yeah, that's just all strength. Yeah.
And people are like, no, you can't call it beef. That's dumb. Come on. And I said, no, it's cool because it's a double meaning. It means not only are you big and beefy and strong, but you got to beef with the monster. You're coming for them. So I handled that task. Another big creative thing that I had to do that was integral to creating the flavor of this game. Every single base type needed a name, all 3 tiers.
Yeah.
And every type, and we had a million base types in the game. Way more than Diablo. I think there was like 11, and plus we had all of these different hybrid versions. We had the pure strength armor progression. We had the strength dex armor, the strength int armor, the dex int armor. Same thing for boots and gloves.
Wow. I didn't know all of that existed at the base. I thought that was added on inevitably. That's crazy.
Yeah. We designed hundreds of base types.
Yeah.
They had to have a progression too. And so I was aided in most of it by top-down design, thanks to Erik, his art team, because they produced pictures of the pieces before they had names.
Yeah.
So I could look at them and be like, okay, what is this thing? What does it look like? What does it remind me of? I'd look around online because it might have maybe an Arabian flair to it, maybe an Asian. I'd look up whatever existed at the time in the early, I guess it was late 2000s at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Look up a whole bunch of different things and be like, okay, it looks very similar to this thing. So I'm going to name it after that, even though it's an ethnic name. But you've got to make a progression because the higher levels need to sound stronger.
Right.
And so I created the entire progression for all the gear. I made all the base types.
Nice.
And then, of course, we needed all the mods too. All the mods that are the heart of the flavor too. So when you find your first items, whether they're rare or magical, that have mods attached to them, they feel compelling. They're informative and interesting and flavorful and inspiring. And they have a very obvious progression too of sometimes 5 tiers of quality, all the way up to embody. It was a monumental task.
Yeah.
I had to name thousands of things, and they all had to make sense and really feel like, yeah, I get that. I understand that sounds stronger.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the main things that I did creatively also. I named all the mods in the game.
Wow.
Prefixes and suffixes. I named all the base types. Another thing that I did was I created the rare prefix suffix naming pool for all the rare items, every item type, and for all the monsters too.
For their mods, yeah. Wow.
So when you run into Stink the Stinking, you're
the one in a million. Brian Weissman.
That was my creation, kind of on purpose.
Yeah.
It was kind of like a funny accident that came as a consequence of creating that pool. But this is something I actually iterated on for a number of years, making the whole heuristic behind how these guys were named better and better and better.
Yeah.
Because originally there was some weird overlaps that just didn't work. You'd run into things that just had the wrong word for that creature type. So I went back and I iterated on that for many years. It was something that I worked on for probably almost to the release of the game and maybe even afterward. And I worked with Edwin to do the flavor text for the zones themselves. So when you look at the map in PoE 1 and it has a little quote on it, I did a bunch of those.
Nice.
I think my favorite one of those was, it might have been in Act 4, actually. I think it was the one for the mines when you go down in there.
Okay.
Disease in the darkness. Because when you go down into the mines, you run into these monsters. They're called pocked miners.
Yeah.
Erik really ramped up the kind of unease. There's a specific phobia, trichtophobia, I think it might be called.
Okay.
Which is the fear of holes in things.
Yes. Yeah.
Phobia. The monsters in the mines are meant to trigger people's tryptophobia. There's some people, like my wife, gets totally, and my son both get really uneasy around things that are riddled with holes.
Yeah.
So I looked at the art for these creatures down there, and I'm like, they look like they've had some horrible ravaged case of smallpox or something, and that's what's left, called pocked miners, which incidentally relates to the fact that I named every mob in the game up through Act 4.
That's crazy.
So, yeah, and again, all those, like the drowned, for example, which are still in the game, those zombies that you encounter in the very first zone, I wrote their name.
So how many of those names were intentional or had some sort of, actual narrative design behind them already during your naming, or were they all just off the froth of your mind? Yeah.
No, great question. They related a lot. It depended on where they spawned. And actually, I had this side project that ultimately it was too monumental of a creative task for me to complete, even though I wanted to, because I put a lot of time into it. Back when Diablo II was around, there was this resource, which probably still exists, actually. It's called the Ariat Summit. And it may not be called the Ariat Summit anymore. Maybe that site is defunct. But it was a very early wiki for Diablo II. It had everything on there, all the item stuff. Of course, there's something that exists for that for PoE as well.
Yeah.
And it's been through a bunch of iterations. But we wanted to do an Ariat Summit style database of all of the cool stuff that you encounter playing Path of Exile. And one of the things that they did so well in Ariat Summit, one of the things that was super inspiring to people to get into the lore and the world building.
Yeah.
You imagine, I was a person who, when I played Dungeons and Dragons, I didn't really actually have a lot of interest in playing the game, but I loved reading the books.
Yeah.
I read the books cover to cover over and over and over again. I really loved the lore.
You're a lore guy.
I loved the nomenclature and stuff. Exactly. I didn't really care that much about the mechanics. But talking about naming.
Yeah, just whether or not you had intention behind naming them with actual narrative structure. Yeah.
So the way that relates to the Diablo II Ariat Summit was they did that same sort of thing. You could click on each act, and it would show you a bestiary of all the different enemies that you were going to encounter in that zone.
That's cool.
You could click on each one, and it would have a kind of cool animated picture of it doing a little bit of its idle animation or maybe its attack animation. And there would be a long description of what that monster was all about, its backstory. And they were written very well from a mixture of both exposition, and some of them were actually prosaic.
Wow.
Almost like from the perspective of somebody encountering that monster for the first time in the wild, in Luco Lane. What's it like to meet a sand spitter or whatever in Luco Lane, or one of those carrion vultures or something, it darkened the skies, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I set out to write similar flavor text for all the monsters in the game. Problem was there's like hundreds of them, and it took a lot of time to write these well.
Yeah.
And I got as far, it's kind of embarrassing, but I got about as far as the end of Act 1. To the point where I wrote the backstory for Brutus.
Yeah.
And everything related to Brutus. And to answer your question, Brutus's story related to the broader kind of gem experimentation story. So that's how Brutus kind of came to be. He was an experiment. He was called the Warden originally. He was the jailer of the prison, the raid class prison, where prisoners have been stuffed and stored for thousands of years.
Right.
He's the current warden, and he's immortal because he's a creature created like a Frankenstein's monster created from the gems. And when he found himself transformed from a normal human into this grotesque monstrosity, the first thing that he did was try to break free of his prison, and in his rage, and he pounded his fists into bloody pulp on the walls.
Okay.
Which is why his hands are like these big, blobby, misshapen things.
Yeah.
That happened. It was like a self-injury that was part of my writing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, a couple of those stories are honestly pretty awesome. They're on the Wayback Machine if anyone wants to go look. I think they were on the website in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, and then eventually they got removed when the website just kept developing.
Yeah.
But I wrote the backstory for Merveil, her whole story with Duresso. That was all my stuff, and it was all fleshed out in the bestiary, talking about their romance.
Yeah.
And so on. And about how Merveil was corrupted by a gemstone that she found when she was just out one day by the shore. She found a gemstone and wore it around her neck, and it corrupted her and turned her into this creature that eventually retreated Gollum style deep into the mountains. And Duresso abandoned her. He tried to sort of live with this woman who was being driven insane by this jewel that she wore around her neck and wouldn't let anybody touch. And eventually, once she was like dripping slime at night and stuff, like, I'm out of
here. Yeah, that's hard to sleep next to.
Yeah, he sailed away on the night's tide. That's like how that part of the story ended.
Okay.
But I created a bunch of cool flavor for the people that would care about that sort of thing. That helped Edwin a lot with the world building too. And it was expounded through all of the different, there's a lot of quests that relate to it and so on. And what else was in there? Anything else interesting? A lot of play testing. Oh yeah, one thing that I'll tell you a quick story about. I mentioned before when I was talking about my first experience playing Lord of Destruction and how after whirlwinding through a big pack of mobs, I had to float my cursor over each one to see how
Yeah.
damaged it had been. Well, for years, Chris and I believe Erik and Jonathan all insisted that we use Diablo II's monster auditing style because putting health bars above the enemies ruins immersion.
Yeah.
We want people to be able to focus on the graphics. If there's all these little health bars all over the screen, it removes immersion. And I argued from the other perspective. I said, this is a bandwidth problem. And if you shackle too much of the player's bandwidth, if you make them focus too much on the health of the enemies, they lose track of what's going on. They literally can't appreciate the art because their eyes have to be in a million places at once.
Yeah.
It's actually worse and more distracting. And it also removes a lot of the strategy because when enemies are tough, there's a strategy, there's an order of operations. You can cull the herd, you
Right.
reduce the intensity and threat of the encounter.
Yeah.
In modern design of PoE, you explode the screen so fast usually that none of this stuff matters.
Mm-hmm.
But original PoE, as based on that sign, was a hardcore game. It was tough.
Yeah.
Grindy. People think PoE 2 is hard. PoE 1 was way harder when it first came out. I remember having like a 10-minute fight against, I think his name is Cadaverous, the resurrecting necromancer in the fetid pools.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Guy that you just accidentally kill now.
Yeah.
Without even realizing
exactly.
it.
Yeah.
I remember fighting him with two friends of mine. We fought him for like 10 minutes trying to grind through that fight with resurrecting Roas and stuff.
Yeah.
The game was grindy and way, way, way harder. And of course that was long before all of the power creep had made its way into later designs of it.
Yeah.
Thinking about sort of the final point here. I think just in general, as far as ongoing contributions. Oh yeah, that's right. I was telling a story about the health plates.
Yeah.
So I believed that the lack of health plates on enemies just made combat too difficult. It was already very grindy and tough. And you were just simply asking too much of the player to force them to monitor the health of all the enemies as well, while they were still just fumbling with the controls and dealing with the danger of the encounters. So I suggested, hey, let's put little health bars above all the enemies. They don't have to be big and obtrusive. We don't need to do floating combat text. I definitely don't think we need to do that because it was in Diablo 3 at that point. This is 2012.
Yeah.
But I think that we need to at least give people this quality of life. And I was fought tooth and nail internally to not do that. Chris repeated the mantra that he repeated many, many, many times, and he's usually right. Diablo 2 didn't do this. So why would we do it?
Yeah.
Eventually, at my insistence, basically, he threw an engineer on it. And the engineer put together a kind of rough draft of how it might look, a simple implementation of it. And apparently, unbeknownst to me, I didn't get a chance to do it. They tested it on the internal alpha servers for a weekend or something.
Oh.
And then they turned it off again.
Yeah.
And a while later, it might have been a year later, I was at this point, I think we were in 2012. So we're in the families and friends alpha, as well as very close kind of supporters and patrons of the game. And I was visiting New Zealand and I said, hey, Chris, can you turn that enemy health bars back on? I'd like to at least play test with them because I didn't get a chance to do that. He said, oh, we did a play test of that. People didn't like it. I said, just turn it on for me, please. Just toggle a switch. He goes, okay, fine. I'll turn it back on. So he turned it on. I didn't get a chance to play with it. The next morning, I came into the office and we're sitting there and the enemy health bars are on. And I'm running around going, yeah, this is rad. This is exactly what I wanted. Chris stops at some point and he reads me an email from a guy named Charon, who anybody that frequented the PoE forums years ago would recognize his name in a second because he served as a mod, a kind of de facto mod for many years.
Mm-hmm.
He was pretty much the game's original super fan. He lived in Australia, and when we offered our very first supporter packs back in, I think it was April of 2012, when we had a very successful open beta weekend where 45, 50,000 people flooded in and played the game and had a really good time and
Yeah.
said, hey, we want to support what you're doing. We really believe in this vision. We spent about a week slapping together a crowdfunding campaign internally involving the famous Kiwi pets.
Yeah.
With the whole progression of Kiwis from brown to diamond. And incidentally, I wrote I wrote a thing for that. I wrote the text for each of the supporter packs, telling
Okay.
the story of Kiwi's journey through Ray class, like the upgraded versions of the Kiwis,
Yeah.
all the way up to the Diamond Kiwi. Well, 250-ish people bought the Diamond Kiwi pack, the best one, which was crazy. It was
That's
$1,000.
insane. Yeah.
And in retrospect, had we known this, we would have probably changed the incentives for it, because the chief perk that you got from buying a Diamond Kiwi and giving this unknown company in New Zealand, developing this, at the time, rather warty looking Diablo II quote unquote ripoff,
Yeah.
is design your own unique item and put it into the game.
That's where
What
that
a cool, right?
Yeah.
It's very problematic when it's like 250 people.
Yeah.
And every one of them has a long, drawn-out idea about the item that they want, and they want all these personalizations done. They generally want it super OP, so it needs novel code. Some people wanted flavorful. They wanted flavor text. The weapons had, like, I think Charon himself wanted a weapon that talks to you.
He got it.
Jack the Axe, I think, is what it's called.
Well, there's Onigoroshi too, which is called Charon's Blade or something, and it talks to you. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, there you go. That was his idea, right? It takes a lot of work to make a weapon that talks to you.
Yeah.
And when there's 250 of these in the queue, it's problematic. Incidentally, people in your audience may not know this, but you know that there's a weapon in the game that was designed by the guy who made Minecraft?
Notch?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Which one?
It's funny that that's not common knowledge.
No.
To you.
No.
Infractum, which is a bow, a unique bow. Infractum is an anagram of Minecraft. And it even has the word notch in the flavor text.
That's amazing. I'll have to pull it up.
Yeah. This was back when Notch was all in the news around the time when I believe Minecraft was being sold to Microsoft. And one day I just suggested to Erik, hey, Erik, he's a fellow Swede. Why don't you reach out some Notch and say, hey, dude, you should try our game out, as from one Swede to another.
Yeah.
Come and try out Path of Exile. And Notch not only played the game, but he posted to his massive following that it was one of the most exciting games that he had seen in a very long time.
Wow.
And he bought a supporter pack for $1,000 in our game and made Infractum. And he got kind of jumped to the top of the list.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Well, even Notch's patronage paled in comparison to Charon's. Charon, I think, bought at least 5, if not 10, of those Diamond Kiwi supporter packs.
Yeah.
And eventually he bought, a few years later, we did the craziest promotion of all. We offered a promotion where the top supporter tier was $50,000.
Yeah.
To earn the title of Ruler of Ray class, which he wore proudly in his forum flare from that point onward. And the benefit of becoming a Ruler of Ray class was you got to design your own monster.
Oh.
Can you guess what Charon's monster was? Now, here's a hint.
Okay.
It's Australian. Think of a monster that's very famously endemic to Australia. It isn't so like a poison.
I'm so bad at this.
It isn't a venomous animal.
It isn't a venomous animal. Okay. Yeah.
It's not a venomous. Although they apparently have a funny reputation, and their reputation carries over into their design in the game.
Kangaroo, marsupial of some kind, yeah.
Those are great guesses, and kangaroos are also these guys are not actually dangerous, unless maybe they give you, they harbor some awful disease. Oh, it's either syphilis or gonorrhea or something. It is devastating the population, unfortunately. They got it from people. Koalas.
Koalas, okay.
Koalas. Only in PoE they're called plummeting ursine. And the reason why they're called plummeting ursines is because, well, plummeting means to fall from a high place, right? And ursine is another word for bear.
Right.
And in Australia, a vernacular term for them is drop bear.
Because they fall from trees?
Yeah, they don't pounce on people.
Right. They just accidentally fall from trees all the time.
They're so clumsy, they just fall off the tree and land on people.
Those
And
bears
they're
are
big.
hilarious though in the game that just fall on you.
Yes, this rain of bears. Those are Charon's creation. Anyway,
That's
back to
amazing.
Charon. Why am
Yeah.
I talking about Charon? On that morning, Chris reads me an email from Charon. And Charon says, Chris, I've been testing this game for a year or so. And to be honest, I've been pretty burned out on it for a while.
Yeah.
There was something missing. And this morning I woke up, and for the very first time in I don't know how long, I'm excited to play Path of Exile. And it's because of the enemy health plates. And I'm like, excellent.
That's
I was
the
right.
perfect endorsement. Yeah.
Totally. Proof of concept. And they're very commonplace. What's weird is that they're by default turned off in PoE 2. You have to go into the UI and turn them on again. So
Yeah.
a lot of people are playing Path of Exile 2 without the health plates.
Yeah.
Because the average person that downloads and plays that game probably doesn't even know that they exist.
Yeah. They don't check the settings.
It's quite interesting. And the thing is that because PoE 2 is so much more grindy in a sense, it takes longer to kill stuff unless you're a power gamer.
Right.
There's a lot of time spent running back and forth and looking at the boss's giant health bar as you try to beat it to death. So
Yeah.
you're kind of aware of it anyway. It doesn't have quite the same consequences, I think, mechanically and as far as the immersion goes. But I certainly play with them on, and I recommend most others do.
Oh yeah.
So that was one of the kind of the big mechanical things that I got put into the game. And then I decided I kind of helped. I worked on the game mostly as a sort of sweat equity founder for between 2006 and 2010. And the reason is because we were developing a very novel product, a game that was attempting to usurp a very established and beloved IP with tens of millions of people who played it and had a very, very lofty standard for what that experience was going to be like. We knew immediately as soon as we announced Path of Exile that everybody would very disparagingly call it a Diablo ripoff.
Mm-hmm.
We literally used a ton of stuff directly from Diablo, and it's the instant you look at the interface, it looks exactly like Diablo, and that's of course on purpose.
Right.
Massive amounts of uncertainty just around the potential of the product to get to market. By 2010, we had been toiling on the game for 4 years. I had made multiple trips out to New Zealand, spent hundreds and hundreds of hours thinking about and working on the game. And I had done less work on it than the other co-founders and our employees. And I had put some money into it, but not a majority of my net worth at that point because I was still being cautious.
Yeah.
And every time I played the game, it felt a little better, but it just didn't have it yet. And we'd been working on it so long. I had other people in my orbit saying, Brian, it's probably not going to come to pass. It's impossible to make a successful game as a tiny little indie studio. You can't take on a juggernaut. It's hopeless.
Yeah.
But in late 2009, it was actually coincidentally right before my son was born. He was born in January of 2010. I was on a trip out to New Zealand, and we had a Christmas party where we invited not only the staff, but all the staff's friends and a bunch of friends and family and stuff. Mm-hmm. And we had a working demo of the game at the Christmas party. You could just hop down on one of maybe 4 PCs that were laid out and play. You could actually play PoE for real.
Yeah.
And up to that point, every time I had played the game, it just felt like there was nothing going on. I'd screw around, I'd walk through the level a bit, kill a few monsters. There's no animations. My arm would go like this and the monster would just suddenly be on the ground.
Yeah.
The loot wasn't interesting. There was nothing going on. But I played this demo that had been really kind of hyper-tuned for this event. And I'm running around, and I believe it was the Lunaris tile set, which is really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Taking in the art, running around, killing stuff, and I realize this feels like Diablo. It really feels like Diablo now. It's moving the same way. I'm feeling like I'm caring about what the monsters are dropping the same way. When the items drop, I'm excited. I'm clicking on them and reading what they do and putting them on my guy and feeling like I'm getting stronger.
Yeah.
It was the very, very first time where I went, I think we might be really onto something here. It's the first time I really believed in it. Because up to that point, it kind of just felt like a passion project, like a hobby project.
Yeah.
That experience instilled me to really pull the trigger, to really go in deep on executive production. And so I made a huge investment of my net worth into development, which was sorely needed because we needed to hire more staff to bring it to light. I made another investment later on that year, and I made a final round of investment, really, but the last of the money that I had at the time in 2011, when we sold a small portion of the company to some friends and insiders
Okay.
who were all other Diablo fans who had gone on and been successful in other
Yeah.
endeavors and had something to throw our way. And that collective amount of money that we took in allowed us to extend our runway by more than a year. It was really, really instrumental in kind of bringing the game to light. And that gave us another year and a half production. And then there was that big monumental moment that I hinted at earlier in our conversation, that open beta weekend.
Yeah.
And in the run up to the open beta weekend, I did a bunch of press and stuff. We had done a thing that I know Chris talked about it extensively and wrote, I think, a lengthy article about it. We called it guerrilla journalism. And that's the Guerri, guerrilla, the idea of hit and run journalism, which is what we did at PAX in 2010, where we had that very simple workable demo. Basically, we allowed people to go and run around in the cliffs area of Act 1.
Okay.
Which at the time looked atrocious. It was like a giant blazing spotlight where everything was washed out and oversaturated.
Yeah.
And the animations were super clunky and everything was weirdly shiny. Like the game was super shiny for some reason. The engine was just making everything like really glistening and overly shiny. And we went to PAX, the four of us, and we just walked around on the floor. We didn't have a booth. And when we found people that had a journalist badge on them, we said, "Hey, we're this little upstart indie company from New Zealand, and we're working on a game that's meant to kind of be a very Diablo-like game. If we could have a moment of your time, would you like to come into this back room where nobody is, down in a chair with a laptop and take a look at what we're making?" And we managed to rope in a dozen journalists or so on the chance that they might do a write-up, and I believe a couple of them actually did.
Mm-hmm.
Put their brewing down under in New Zealand. And then of course we showed the game at PAX in 2011 to an audience. We had there's actually a very kind of funny story about this. There's a non-zero chance that Path of Exile owes a portion of its success to a complete fluke of fortunate coincidence that happened at PAX in 2011.
What's that?
We were able to rent an actual booth on the prime floor of the convention hall when most of the indie companies were upstairs in Indie Hell, which is basically this area that a lot of people didn't. I mean, it's heavily trafficked, but it's like the spaces are tiny. You kind of just walk down a row of doctors showing indie products, which are very recognizable as indie games. We were down on the showroom floor alongside big companies like at the time, I think Firefall was all the rage. There was this Chinese company that had pumped like $150 million into making this game that was eventually called Firefall.
Yeah.
And they had spent a gajillion dollars to basically sponsor PAX that year. So there was Firefall stuff everywhere.
Wow.
And we had our little booth. It was basically 12 feet wide. We had a table and we had, I think, 5 monitors set up on the table. We had to run to Home Depot to get clamps and stuff to make sure we could clamp everything down on this big wooden platform.
I think I've seen video. Yeah.
You may have seen it. And of course, hanging above our booth is that banner that I showed you earlier. Mm-hmm. And the game's in this super, super rudimentary state. And in advance of showcasing the game, we printed up 5,000 beta CDs. That thing says free beta CDs.
Yeah.
We made 5,000 of them, a huge chunk of our budget. Like this whole PAX thing cost a lot of our R&D budget, essentially. It was very, very expensive. And Chris is an insanely good manager and always very careful about spending every penny.
Mm-hmm.
So during this time, for example, we didn't stay in a very good hotel. We stayed in the cheapest hotel that was near the convention center and so on. It was super, super, like everything was, or they did actually. No, wait, they stayed at my house. What am I even saying?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of GDC more recently.
Yeah.
But they stayed at my house and just to save money.
Heck yeah.
And we set up the tables and stuff. We've got our beta CDs sitting there in a big box, and we're like, "Come one, come all, come check out our game."
Yeah.
And for the first few hours, it's really quiet. People are coming by. They look. They kind of see that it looks Diablo-like. We've got an example game. There's not a lot of interest though. And I remember standing there, and I was so eager to evangelize and talk about the project, and it just felt like nobody really cared. But and meanwhile, right to the right of us, there was this booth that was, I don't know what the game that they were showcasing was. It had endless dubstep music looping
Oh God.
for 4 days.
Yeah.
Dubstep was all the rage. It was constant.
You just got
Like,
Skrillex over there in your ear. Yeah.
oh, it's awful. Skrillex is a master auteur compared to what they were playing. It was honestly awful. So we had this dubstep music going on in the background. Nobody seems to care. But then all of a sudden, the booth to our left kind of wakes up. It has a sign above it that says Good Old Games, which is a company you've probably heard of.
GOG, yeah.
Yeah, it's GOG's booth. I don't know if they were fairly new at that point, but they were kind of playing to this old-timey aesthetic. Remember those games you played as a kid back in your childhood, how fun they were? Well, guess what? What if they were all on a database and you could buy them for 25 cents each or something?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be fun, right? It's like when you first get your first access to MAME, the multiple arcade machine emulator.
Yeah.
So, wait a minute, I download every arcade game ever played and they're all like a K.
Yeah.
Like
It's
1
wild.
kilobyte each. Street
It's
Fighter 2 is
mind-boggling.
like 1 megabyte.
Yeah.
Mind-boggling, right? It's a little bigger than that, but it's insane how small those games are. So that was their aesthetic. And to enforce that aesthetic, they had hired these 2 women, these older women from the food service company that did the food service at the convention. These 2 old grannies who they had dressed up in aprons.
Yeah.
Bought these 2 ovens. And for the next 4 days, periodically throughout the convention, they cooked a giant batch of cookies, chocolate chip cookies in these ovens. And of course, the scent of these cookies is emanating out through the whole convention hall. Cloud of cookie smell. And
that's probably a welcome smell over the convention floor.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. It's very crowded. Either way, what is that, cookies? I'm going to go follow that. Well, the result of that was a line that formed right in front of our booth.
That's perfect.
As people were lining up to go get cookies at the Good Old Games booth. And eventually the line's like 100 people long. I don't know why people would wait in a line that long.
It's literal granny cookies, Brian.
And they had nothing to do while waiting in line. This is 2011, so it's not like you can sit there and game on your phone or anything.
Right.
It's a different era. Plus, the internet at PAX was unusable, basically, because there was so little. It was like 3G or maybe
what
earlier.
even was Wi-Fi back then?
Yeah, you have that many people focused in one place. It's like a singularity of cell signal. Nothing gets out. So they have nothing to do. And they're standing in line waiting to get cookies. And they look over and there's this booth there of a game that looks a lot like Diablo II. And so they walk over and they go, "Hey, what are you guys working on?" And before we know it, we gave away every single CD.
Amazing.
Over the span of the convention, I had dozens and dozens of conversations talking to people about the project. A lot of people were really, really excited about it. And that segued into the following year when we did our first open beta weekend. That's what really, I think, got them started. And leading up to that open beta weekend, we had so many reservations about doing it. There's a famous quote, which bears repeating here. You only get one chance to make a first impression. And that is triply true in the gaming space, where there's so much competition for people's time and attention. It's not just a matter of getting them interested in what you're making, but you have to take them off of what they're currently playing too.
Right.
It's getting someone to try a new product is more than doubly hard, because you have the other points of friction too. The fact that it often requires money. It certainly requires time investment. Human beings are creatures of habit and generally low resistance. So getting people to enjoy this thing that you're working on, how on earth do you accomplish that? Very, very tough. And we ultimately decided that it was time. We were seriously running out of money anyway.
Yeah.
And we were hoping that this would at least galvanize the public, to make the public aware of what we were making, that we might get some external support, or at least the groundswell of interest might attract some additional investors to come in rescue, because we were really out of runway. And we held that open beta weekend. I logged in every day early in the morning and I sat in Twilight Strand on my flared, Brian Weissman or whatever my account was.
Yeah.
And people played the game and I answered questions in global chat for 3 days or whatever it was, talking to 50 people at once, spamming them with questions and stuff and feedback and other, it was all hands on deck. Everybody pulled through. There was bugs and crashes and all the things you'd expect. But at the end of the day, when the dust had cleared, we had gotten something like 50,000 people to play the game.
Wow.
And it was unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
Just crazy for a company of our size at the
Yeah.
time, totally unknown, and no real marketing budget. It was apparent to people as a consequence of all the work that everybody had put in and all the things that we had figured out in this genre. The big pot was bubbling and percolating, and it had a lot more than 40 ingredients in it also. It was
Yeah.
up to 100. There was a lot of really innovative stuff in the game at that point.
Yeah.
That sparked the minds of people that were playing it. And the unanimous thing that we received afterward was that people wanted to support what we were making. They really believed in the vision, and they wanted to help take it to its natural conclusion, to a release that would befit all of the work and time and investment and innovation that we had put into the product.
Yeah.
And so we had about a week, like I mentioned before, to slap together this kind of Kickstarter campaign. We pressed the button to turn it on, and like the first day we took in $45,000.
Now, Kickstarter existed back then, though, didn't it?
It did, but if you did a Kickstarter campaign, first of all, they were way, way, way more, just like Valve, platforming your game and so on. Kickstarter was way more particular about what they would host.
Okay.
You had to spend a long time building a campaign. You had to get their approval. You had to prove that you were real, that you weren't just a scam. You know, a lot of that oversight has disappeared, and now you've got projects, things that make millions on Kickstarter and never see the light of day because there's no oversight anymore.
And you guys already had a well put together website with forums that was receiving traffic, and you said, let's make our own Kickstarter.
Exactly. We just said, you know, if we do Kickstarter, we're just going to be leaving 30,000 or 30% on the table or whatever their rate is. And we needed every dollar. So we believe that we could do it internally. And like I said, we spent about a week putting that campaign together. Again, all hands on deck.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, people wanted to buy Kiwis.
They're cute.
They wanted to support what we're doing. Sharon bought 5 of these things. Minecraft guy bought one. A bunch of other really cool people came in, and we massively bolstered and grew the community. And I believe the word on the street that was public information is that we raised about $2.5 million over the next year or so.
Mm-hmm.
There was another huge piece of this that I definitely don't want to overlook, and that was the influence of Kripparrian in the spread of the game.
Yeah.
Good old Krip. Because I had watched Krip back in 2012. I didn't really know much about him, but Twitch TV was in a much more rudimentary state. This is long before Amazon bought it and so on.
It might have even been Justin TV back then, yeah.
Yeah, it was still Twitch TV. It had been switched over from Justin TV, but it hadn't been around for that long.
Yeah.
And if you were doing well on Twitch TV in 2012, you had an audience of maybe 1,000 people.
Right.
Forget about hundreds of thousands or whatever exists now.
Mm-hmm.
And Krip had been a very, very prominent, famous player, strategist, theorist, and theory crafter for World of Warcraft. He raided in a very high-end guild. I think he did PvP. He made guides. He was primarily, I think, a hunter main.
Okay.
His guides were for elite hunter play. And, of course, I'm sure the guy was one of the best players in the world at the game because he's an insane gamer and just brilliant dude all around. And Krip was kind of done with his World of Warcraft stuff by 2012. So he jumped full bore into Diablo III when it came out.
Okay.
He had played tons of Diablo II, loved the game as much as we did, understood it inside and out. And he's like, Diablo 3's out. I'm going to go after it. And I watched Krip after. I didn't know him personally at the time. I just, he was just a guy that played Diablo 3. But I watched him do the unthinkable alongside his play partner, a guy named Krippy, I think.
Yeah.
The two of them went after hard Inferno level difficulty Diablo in Diablo 3 on hardcore.
Yeah.
In a game that was massively overtuned when it first came out. There's that famous phrase from Jay Wilson where they were trying to balance the game and they were getting it ready for release. And they're like, the balance feels off. Some parts feel too hard. Some parts feel too easy. But I'm getting more too easy than too hard. And Jay goes, okay, well, just double everything. Double all the health of the monster. Double their damage. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, don't double the player's damage. Just double the monsters.
Yeah.
And we'll let the players sort it out.
That'll do it.
So when Diablo, that was the version of D3 that came out. I remember playing that game a ton when it came out.
Yeah.
And you just get one shot all the time.
Yeah.
You have no idea what even kills you. It's like some random glowing monster appear on the screen, and then there's beams everywhere and you're dead. And the idea that and things exploded too. The monsters would die and leave a little ember hidden in the big pile of crap, and it would explode and kill you instantly.
Yeah.
Like it had so many insta-gives, it was ridiculous. And you get stun locked constantly. The game was so hard, even with the 2 auction houses that it had. In fact, people theorized, I think incorrectly, that the reason why the game was so overtuned was they were forcing people to use the auction house.
The real money auction house? Yeah.
And gear up to be able to beat the gear. I don't believe that that's true, actually.
Yeah.
We can talk about the real money auction house as it relates to auction houses and RPGs a little later, maybe. But either way, the game was insanely overtuned, almost to the point of not being fun. And Kripp somehow, improbably, had not only leveled a barbarian up to level 88 or something on hardcore, but he was getting ready to take on Inferno level Diablo.
Yeah.
First person in the world to try to do it. In advance of that, he leveled up another character on softcore to almost the same point, so that he could die repeatedly. And he and Krippy practiced on softcore Diablo for a week or so to just get the whole rhythm of the fight down, because you can get one shot at so many stages of that fight, even in fully decked out barbarian. And he was basically, his character was very, it was pure tanky, all survival, very little damage. Meanwhile, Krippy was playing a sorceress, or a sorcerer from, I think a sorceress, way off the screen, shooting long range stuff from off the screen to deal damage to Diablo, just to help out. And you didn't want to have a third person in there because his movements got too chaotic and he was 3 times as tough. So they reasoned that 2 people were the right number. Anyway, these guys finally do it. I remember watching. He presses the button to begin the fight. And just like the arena style combat in PoE 2, once you start the fight, it's
do or die.
2 men enter, 1 man leave. Exactly. It's do or die. And I remember watching that. And at the beginning of the fight, which took 25, 30 minutes or something, there were 10,000 people watching. And I just watched with disbelief as the numbers went up and up and up and up. And by the end, Diablo was down to a sliver. There was like 50,000 people watching this.
Live. Yeah.
Live on Twitch TV. I mean, what a monumental event. And they won. They defeated Inferno Diablo for the first time. This catapulted Kripp to fame. He became an immediate thought leader in the Diablo space. And not long after that, he kind of, having successfully defeated Inferno Diablo, there really wasn't much left to do. And he made some more videos and he played some more characters, but it was really obvious that the fire had gone out of his enthusiasm. And so I decided, you know what? I'm going to write to him.
That was you?
I'm going to write to him. That was me.
Oh my God.
I write to Kripp and I'm like, hey, I'm Brian Weissman. I'm the co-founder of this little game development company in New Zealand. We've been making this game called Path of Exile for the last roughly 6.5 years or so.
Yeah.
And you might have heard of me. You certainly seem like you're a guy who probably has played Magic in the past. You definitely have.
Yeah.
So you might appreciate some of my bona fides. But the game we're working on is really in the same, and I've heard you voice a lot of frustration and disappointment in Diablo 3. And the fact that it has so many of these kind of just both aimless and empty and very remedial systems in it. It's not scratching that theory crafter, power gamer, gigabrain sensibility that you have. Guess what? Our game is that. And it doesn't look great, but it's worth a look. Why don't you come and take a look at it? Here's a key. Here's a key for your friend. Here's 10 keys. Look me up if you want to have a conversation about it. And I sent that off to him. And a little bit of time passed. It might have been a month or so. He didn't reply back, I don't think. Not initially. And I believe, I think I might have even done this in advance of the open beta weekend. But after the open beta weekend happened, after that event happened, it piqued his interest because he heard about it. And I think Chris reached out to him the second time.
Yeah.
I was definitely the first person to make the introduction, but Chris reached out the second time. And Chris says, hey, you should try out the game, man. Why not? So I remember very vividly the first day that Kripp played PoE. I wonder if anybody in the audience remembers this, because it was 13 years ago. It's insane to consider.
There's probably still clips out there. Kripp has a very well cataloged history on YouTube. Yeah.
He starts out playing, and I played a lot of Magic the Gathering, and one of the things that I do a lot when I play Magic is I watch people's eyes all the time. I pay very close attention to their eyes. I look where their eyes go. I do it also when I talk to people in conversations, because people can't help but betray how they feel with how their eyes move.
Right.
Profilers and stuff do that all the time too, right?
Yeah.
Apparently, if somebody's recounting a story in an interrogation, if they look up to the left versus up to the right, they're either talking about the future or the past. And if they're talking about the future, when they're relaying something that happened in the past, they're lying. You can tell immediately based on where they look. Apparently, that's relatively true.
I wonder if that has any idea or any correlation to what side of the brain they're using when they're thinking. It's interesting.
That's a really good interesting point. Yeah, actually, the whole left brain, right brain thing, and where what the brain is good at doing.
Mm-hmm.
The recollection side versus the creative side. Yeah, left brain is supposed to be more creative, I guess.
Yeah, interesting.
That makes sense. They look up to the right, they're creating. So maybe that's what it is. Or maybe it's all bullshit like lie detectors. Right. Who knows? Either way, I'm watching Krip's eyes as he logs in to play PoE for the first time. And this is what he looks like.
But he always looks like that. But yeah.
And his chat is crawling. Like, he's very famous now as a streamer, right?
Yeah.
Because of the Diablo III stuff.
Mm-hmm.
His chat is hitting all over the game.
Mm.
Diablo II ripoff. Oh my God, so clunky. Look at the animations. When was this game made? 1986?
Yeah.
Oh my God, you're rubber banding and desyncing again. What a piece of shit. And it looks like he's just playing the game out of obligation.
Right.
We didn't pay him to play it. He played it on his own accord, of course. We definitely could not afford for him to play it.
Yeah.
He's running through the game and he kills Hillock. And he goes into the first town and he's talking to the people and he doesn't care about the dialogue. Right. He's clicking on the shit and there's like 9 things to listen. No, not interested. Okay, I got a quest. That's concrete. I go out. I go to the mud flats or whatever it is. You know, the second development, the coasts. He goes and he gets the first quest done and he turns it in. And then he starts to get his first quest rewards. He gets a couple of gems. He gets a couple of socketed items and he's playing around with them. He's like, oh, that's interesting. What if I take this cleave and I link it up to this thing or whatever? Oh, now it's going faster. That's cool. And he finds his way to leap slam pretty early on. And I guess maybe leap slam. Actually, it wasn't leap slam. It was the thing where you slam your thing down and it creates like a decal on the ground. Ground slam.
Ground slam, yeah.
Ground slam. He finds ground slam and he gets like a 3-link item and he links up ground slam to do ice damage and faster attack speed. And it starts just kicking the shit out of the content, which is actually very hard and overtuned.
Yeah.
By the time he's through Act 1, which he plays through over a few hours, he's not like this anymore. He's like sitting up a little bit.
Focused.
Kind of more into it, looking at the screen, moving around. Chat is still kind of mixed on the game.
Yeah.
And at the end of Act 2, which is all the content that existed at the time, he gets into the pyramid, right? And God, getting to the pyramid was such a slog because of how the quests worked back then.
Mm-hmm.
Had to like backtrack and go to the Oak was out in the pools and streams area.
It still works that way.
Pyramid. It's a little more streamlined than it was originally. Yeah. It was 75% of the questions that I fielded as I used to log in every morning or whenever possible and hang out and answer questions in global. 75% of the questions eventually were, where the fuck is Oak? I've been running around for 4 hours. Where is Oak? Because you had to go through the pyramid and pop up on the other side to find him, which was just very circuitous.
Yeah.
Anyway, he goes all the way up into the Vol pyramid, and the game's really hard. You know, those little triangular things that shoot you with those arrow things from off the screen. Those things could one-shot you easily, and he died a bunch of times. And he's going and going and going, and he eventually gets to the Vol Oversoul, which was a really cool fight.
Yeah.
You know, mechanically, it had amazing atmosphere. The music was fantastic. When it comes boiling up out of the ground, and you're like, oh, Jesus, what is this thing? Although it does look a little goofy.
Yeah.
It kind of has this weird, like, mobile trash compactor look to it or something with the tentacles. And it moved awkwardly. The animations weren't great, but it was lethal. I mean, it had the big thing where it goes, kaboom, and it one-shot you.
Yeah.
You were underneath it. So he's fighting against the Vol Oversoul, and I'm actually chatting with Chris, and his audience has swelled up to 1,500, 2,000 people are now watching.
Yeah.
And instead of being bored and disinterested, he is like upright.
Locked in.
Focus mode.
Yeah.
Locked in. You know, smiling frequently. Chat is like, go, you know, do it. And he figured out that he could use a combination of ice wall and ground slam to put up a barricade between all of these lethal attacks that the Vol Oversoul did and the mobs and the raining stuff from the ceiling, which did a ton of damage to debris.
Yeah.
And ground slam through the ice wall, hitting the Vol Oversoul with the last little bit of the decal to damage it while he was safe, because it was insanely lethal. And he killed it. He killed it after Chris predicted that he would die. And from that point on, he was hooked.
Yeah.
And he started playing the game every single day with his big crew. All of those guys migrated over from D3 and started playing Path of Exile.
Yeah.
And then there was that big viral moment that happened a few months in, which I'm sure you've seen.
Yeah.
The corpse explosion
He corpse exploded
moment.
the boss.
He's like running along, level 87 hardcore character, decked out. What? I'm dead.
Yeah.
And like 3 other people in the group are dead also.
They're like, what the heck happened? Yeah.
Yeah. And his response to that, goes from being shock, astonishment, and then eventually he's kind of amused by it.
He just starts laughing.
He's such a cool dude, and he's such a hardcore gamer that he's like, yeah, I get it. You got me. Well done.
Yeah. He's like, the fact that was even a mechanic, I think, impressed him. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. The double boss explode.
Mm-hmm.
So the game grew massively after that.
Yeah.
Krip's contributions to the game, we called it the Kripp effect. Impossible to know really where the game would be in modern day if Kripp hadn't gotten a hold of it and started to play it and produce content for it for years. And it's also important too, because as the community started to build, and we were financially successful right out of the gate from the moment the game, objectively, we were financially successful even before we were released, because a $2.5 million internal Kickstarter is a success. There are very, very few games earn $2.5 million in revenue, and that was much more money than we had invested in the project up to that point anyway. So we were already profitable, even when we were still in development mode. When the game released, it just took off.
Did seeing that initial just influx of funds, did that actually influence your decision to make it free to play at all, or was that always the plan from Chris's garage?
Great question. I've talked about this a lot, and I have a lingering suspicion. Don't hold me to any authority, because I have nothing to do with the decision of the project, but I have a suspicion that when PoE 2 releases, it will not be free.
Really?
Don't hold me to that authority, right? That's not an official statement by any measure. I have a suspicion that it will not be free. And I think Tencent, who controls this product, is going to look at what happened with the early access income and just looking at what's going on in gaming in general. PoE 2 is objectively a AAA title.
Yeah.
It is very deserving of that moniker. The game is a visual masterpiece.
The fact that it's free is insane. Yeah.
It plays incredibly well. It is fun, fluid, and dynamic. It has beautiful animation and art design and sound design. The sounds in the game are so good.
Yeah.
It has an insane story, an amazing campaign. It needs years of balance still.
Right.
It needs years of polish, but so did PoE 1.
Of course.
It's an incredibly complicated system with a million moving parts. It's got some of the best game designers and developers in the world working on it, but it's a monumental project.
Yeah.
It will take years before it's in a fully finished state, and it will go through many iterations. And it will regress and then advance and regress and advance, until it's tuned and it's correct. At the end of the day, it is a AAA game.
Yeah.
And AAA games cost $100 now. Why do you give it away for free? What's the point? Why not just sell it for $50 and still do DLC? Because that's how the game is currently monetized. If you want to play PoE 2 tomorrow or today, you can pay $30 on Steam.
Right.
And then pay for DLC stuff too. And it seems like millions and millions and millions and millions of people are perfectly fine doing that.
That $30 box price wasn't a deterrent at all. Yeah.
Not at all. And for I would pay $100 in an instant for a finished version of PoE 2.
I would too.
In a heartbeat.
Yeah.
I think millions of other people would do that too.
But I wonder how much that would influence people's decisions to buy supporter packs down the line if there was a box price and DLC. Paid
I don't
DLC.
think it would matter.
Really?
Yeah, I really don't think it would matter.
Yeah.
I think fundamentally, and we can talk about this later when we talk about my own game development project, but I think fundamentally your job as a game designer is to provide people with fun and dopamine.
Definitely.
And memorable emotional beats and so on. And if you fulfill that obligation, you've done your part, people will reward you for that.
Yeah.
That is the story of Path of Exile, fundamentally. We made the game not to cynically exploit our player base, not to nickel and dime them.
Yeah.
The game has a few things in it now. It's got like loot boxes and so on in it, which I understand is, kind of a necessary decision to make a game like PoE 2 even possible.
Yeah.
because that game cost a fortune to develop. It looks so good because it cost a king's ransom to make. And the quality shows, although it was made on a shoestring budget compared to lots of other projects like, I don't know, Star Citizen.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God.
800 million dollars and counting or something.
Such a money
Like
pit. Yeah.
$1 billion game eventually. It was actually made on a relative shoestring budget compared to that.
Yeah.
But it's a superlative game, and people want to reward people who work hard and devote years of their life to making their lives more enjoyable. There's nothing predatory about that at all. And we gave away this insane experience with no strings attached, no pay to win, a totally egalitarian game. When all around us, people were minting multi-billion dollar fortunes by nickel and diming their player base.
Yeah.
Look at Diablo Immortal, for example.
God.
Utter cynical exploitation of the player base and player goodwill.
Mm-hmm.
A game that's free, but everything is behind a disgusting, despicable paywall.
Yeah.
We did none of those things. And asking somebody to spend $40 or $50 for the initial foray into that experience is not unreasonable at all. So I don't know anything about it at all. I have no idea what decisions are being made at Tencent. But I would be unsurprised if when PoE finally releases and it's like, this is it. This is the finished game. It will not be free. And I think people would be insane to do anything but pay that price and play the game if they like games of genre.
Yeah.
Where are you going to get a better value in your life for $50 than that? It costs $50 to go to Five Guys now. I mean, give me a break. It's ridiculous to even complain about that.
No, I would tend to agree. I'm just curious how much of a corner they've kind of painted themselves into after all these years of having that monetization structure.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if there's a promissory estoppel surrounding it, and maybe there is. Maybe there's too many emphatic statements about that.
Yeah.
Who's to say? But either way, back in 2013 or whatever, and certainly prior to that, we believed that we had to give our game away for free. And truthfully, the whole monetization scheme of our game was kind of like an afterthought. We were just of this opinion that it would present itself in time. All we had to do was focus on making a game that was the game that we wanted to play.
Yeah.
Kick-ass, throwback, dark, gothic horror, adult-oriented, blood and guts ARPG that hit on all the notes, that gave people that hardcore Diablo II experience, and somehow the money would show up.
Yeah.
It turns out that basically the chief business model is quality of life things, mainly stash tab space and stash tabs. I think that's been publicly stated.
Yeah.
That people, we had additional stash space originally, but it wasn't nearly as good. You know, there weren't premium stash tabs, there weren't sorted ones, currency tabs, and so on.
Right.
You couldn't do all those cool shenanigans behind the scenes. You could just get more stash space. And we had a handful of kind of goofy reskinned pets that weren't really compelling.
Yeah.
And people still bought them in droves just to support the project.
Yeah.
You know, I'll pay $100 for this random golden scorpion thing.
Mm-hmm.
So to our delight and shock and endless bemusement, we saw that once the game released, people were paying money to play it.
Yeah.
To enhance the experience, to effectively tip us for the service that we were providing to them. And we were hosting the servers, which is that's not cheap.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to pay for the servers either. You get a free game with free servers.
Secure servers at that, yeah.
But it established an idea that has permeated just been the entire philosophy of Path of Exile from the very beginning. And all four founders were very much on board with this idea of being free to play. Free to play is actually it's kind of actually an interesting segue almost into my disc golf docuseries too.
Perfect.
It's the motto of my disc golf docuseries. And it's much more than just a slogan. It's a philosophy. It's an idea, and it's something that's permeated my entire life as a kind of influencer / thought leader in various gaming endeavors. Street Fighter 2 back in the days, certainly Magic for many, many years, and then in other gaming endeavors too. And it's the idea that if you figure out something novel, if you create something novel and special, you're kind of obligated to share it with other people. Because we are fundamentally all one species. We all kind of care energetically about the same things. And when the more dopamine and joy you spread in the world, it comes back to you in countless ways you can never predict. Kindness is very reciprocal. And your life experience is a mirror of what you present to other people. To me, it's been a no-brainer since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
And that is the philosophy behind Path of Exile too. It's one of the things that's so special about the community and why I think people value what we have done and continue to do philosophically as a company. We've never really had to compromise that in all these years too. Even after selling our project, my child essentially, and Chris's child and Jonathan and Eric's child, and honestly the child of all the people that contributed to in countless ways, Rishi and Rory and Carl and Severn and Reese and Nick and all these core people that worked and slaved on the game for years, and Mark, of course, both Marks, Mark 1 and Mark 2.
Mark 1 and Mark 2.
Amazing people on our team, and all the sysadmins, Thomas and other guys, and countless people that I'm forgetting who've come and gone over the years. But it is a giant collective team effort. The game is a triumph of modern game design and just of how to run an ethical company as well. A transparent, ethical company. I think that Chris and the team and the project deserve all the accolades and love that they have received.
100%.
It's been an insane, incredible, life-altering, once-in-a-lifetime thing to be a part of. And when I reached out to you after you produced that magnificent retelling of the Grinding Gear Games origin story, and you told so much of that story immaculately, so well, that video got a ton of attention for a very good reason. It is an A-plus project.
Thank you.
There was an important piece that was left out, and that was my involvement in the company. There was one question that somebody asked recently in the video that we published last time that I wanted to address before we move on. That was the question of, why aren't you featured more prominently in the press for this game? Why, when 2019 ExileCon happens and there's a camera on the stage fixated on the founders of the company, why are you in the audience watching from a distance? I was at that event, of course. I went out to ExileCon in 2019, and I was wearing a shirt that belonged to one of our sysadmins. There was a trading card game that everybody was playing to help people, something fun to do and to help people mingle and meet each other. Really, really brilliant trading card game that I believe Carl had been the main person who designed it. And all of the staff were wearing shirts that had their name on the back, and I believe their title, actually, or essentially what they did at the company. And then on the front, there was a picture of one of the mobs in the game, and then a requirement that was required to defeat that mob. And there were 4 sysadmins. They were actually the guardians, which was sort of appropriate given their role within the company. All 4 of them were very, very tough, sort of semi-boss monsters, right? The guardians are very strong in the actual game, so these guys were buff. Took a lot of good cards to defeat them. And in the run-up to ExileCon, which was an unbelievable ordeal, it was the first time that we had organized a convention. You know, use Firefest as an example, right? This is way harder than Firefest.
Yeah.
Way harder than Firefest, other than the fact that we weren't holding it on an abandoned island out in the middle of the Caribbean.
We had the advantage. You guys had a little bit better accommodations than Firefest,
Yeah, and considerably more, I would say, competent people.
Yeah.
Either way, Chris and the team did an insane job of pulling that off. Convention was, it went off without a hitch, really. There was only like one hiccup, and that happened in the race. That big race event at the end, with the issue with the seed where they had to restart the race after a little while.
Yeah.
Either way, the run up to that, to get all of that stuff to go off without a hitch, had been a monumental Herculean effort. It had to basically be bug free. And the consequences of that is that the sysadmins who had been at the heart of this had gotten beyond burned out. And one of them is like, I can't do this anymore. I'm going insane. I'm not going to go to the convention. I'm just going to go back to Australia to be with my family, to rest and recuperate. So I inherited his shirt. I was wearing his shirt, and my monster was the Minotaur. And I walked around the floor of this fan meetup convention, people from all over the world, 3,000 people there, the biggest super fans, and no one had any idea who I was. Every time people would ask, they'd mention my name on the back of my shirt, and I'd be like, no, I'm not him.
Yeah.
Brian Weissman, one of the co-founders of the company, and they'd go like, really?
Not that you need credit for your accomplishments, but it is a bad feeling. I mean, yeah.
It was a bad, I mean, it was a bad feeling. It was honestly just kind of weird.
Yeah.
Like, what's behind this? Like, is this my own failing? Did I screw up here? Did I not try to leverage this enough?
Yeah.
Why did I kind of let it languish for so long? And the truth of the matter is that I think I kind of felt like by 2013 that I had contributed to the project in all the ways that really were appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
After 2013, we had so much success. We grew the team rapidly. And every single thing that I did at the company, whether it was community outreach, for example, which Bex did a million times better
Yeah.
than me, whether it was design, which guys like Rishi did way better than me, whether it was dialogue writing, which Edwin and Nick did better than me, whatever the things were.
Yeah.
I don't think objectively, I don't think anybody writes better flavor text than me, but there just isn't that big of a demand for it.
Yeah.
And everything that I had done within the company was basically handled by better qualified people. There just wasn't really anything left for me to do anymore.
Yeah.
And Chris and Jonathan, by nature of just the fact that they were such close friends, that they traveled together, they could coordinate everything, they just thought for simplicity's sake that it made more sense for them to go and be the people who integrated and interacted with the press. That if I came along, there'd be two issues. One, getting three people's input is harder, right? It's just, you can overwhelm a journalist with information.
Yeah.
More importantly, I wasn't talking to them on a daily basis. So there was lots of things going on internally that were discussed every day that I wasn't privy to.
Yeah.
And it was important at that point that I didn't say something publicly that we're not supposed to say. Once I say it to a journalist and blurt it out, well, you can't take that back, right?
Right.
Now the person knows it, and we've maybe committed to a promise, or I've spoiled something that's coming because I didn't know that it was proprietary.
Yeah.
And I think all of these little things collectively just sort of obsolesced my role in the company. So, but by the time 2015, 2016 rolled around, and we started to get overtures from other companies that were interested in buying us out and so on, I was just another one of the shareholders.
Mm.
I did own the second largest amount of stock in the company as a consequence of the fact that I had contributed both sweat equity and executive production. So that was a cool thing.
Right.
And then in 2018, when we did the buyout, which of course was before ExileCon, Tencent took a look at all the people that own some slices of the company, and they said, "Oh, well, Brian owns this X amount of percentage of the company. What is his role at Grinding Gear Games?"
Yeah.
And nobody could really say that I did much of anything.
Yeah.
At that stage, because I hadn't really worked on the game in a very, very long time. I hadn't even really evangelized it. So they rightfully did not view me as essential personnel. So when they did the buyout, that buyout liquidated my entire stake in the company,
Gotcha.
leaving only the three core co-founders as shareholders still, because that made perfect sense, right?
Yeah.
They're still working on the game on a daily basis. I don't work on it anymore, so it doesn't even make any sense. And I think I wanted to kind of keep a little bit of my equity, maybe just to kind of stay attached to the project, but I didn't want to do anything that required longer negotiation that might cause them to get cold feet.
Yeah.
Or cause any kind of complications in the acquisition process, which is already a very difficult and complicated thing.
Yeah.
And so I was okay with that, and I was kind of at peace with it. So when I walked around in 2019, and I'm kind of a ghost here. It's weird.
Yeah.
It made me feel a little sad. I didn't feel any resentment at all. There was no bad blood about it at all.
Right.
It rewarded me in so many ways that I would be insane to complain about any of it.
Yeah.
What a thing to complain about, to be part of this once in a generation gaming event and to receive a huge life-altering, life-transforming windfall from it.
Yeah.
I'd be insane to complain about that. And I don't need the accolation. Or I'm sorry, I don't need the accolades. I don't need the adulation.
Yeah.
I don't, that's not how I really work. I don't thrive on that sort of thing. What's important to me is just to kind of continue the mission statement. And that, I think, is a good segue over into my next real big I have two other big projects that I'd love to talk about. So the once in a lifetime success of Path of Exile and the Tencent buyout effectively left me retired in 2018.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to segue into focusing more on a couple of other key passions of mine. And what's interesting too is that they seem quite unrelated, and yet they are linked together alongside PoE in this interesting trifecta that I have encountered out in the wild so many times, more times than I can count at this point, where I run into somebody on the disc golf course or playing Magic. Not so much in PoE because I don't play the game as much.
Right.
You know, I'll wear a PoE shirt when I'm playing disc golf or when I'm playing Magic. And the amount of people that recognize one of those IPs across those three things, it's pretty crazy, particularly among people who play Commander format in Magic.
Okay.
The overlap between, it's something I've devoted quite a bit of thought and even some writing to. Why do so many Commander players play both Path of Exile and Disc Golf? What is going on? I have some theories about it, but I think fundamentally, the people who play all three of those games enjoy the problem-solving aspect of them. They just delight in solving complicated problems.
Yeah.
And of course, in Magic, the complicated problem is this unfolding math / opposing player psychology problem that you're trying to solve. In PoE, it's generally you're playing PvE because PvP isn't terribly popular in Path of Exile.
Right.
Best of my knowledge, yeah, that was something we did not predict at all, because PvP was the lifeblood of Diablo II for years. And yet when we released PvP content in PoE, nobody seemed to care about it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Or really move the dial.
It's so hard to balance too in a game like
Yeah,
that.
it's so hard to balance. Yeah, exactly. It may have just been that the power creep just made it so that you just slaughter the other person without putting weird fetters on the game.
Yeah.
And disc golf, this passion that I've had since 1998, roughly,
Really?
is all about problem solving. That game, disc golf, is a physics problem, an ongoing physics problem that you have to solve. I was introduced to the sport by a friend of mine, actually, who thought that I might enjoy it because I had played tons of Ultimate Frisbee through high school and even a little bit in college. And he showed up at my door one day with a disc that was kind of standard disc back in 1998, when the discs were still in a much more rudimentary place with regards to not only the way that they were designed, but also the polymers that they used. The sport has evolved as injection molding technology has gotten better, and just as creating essentially plastic alloys has advanced.
Yeah.
There's so much interesting recombinance you can do with plastic molecules to create just the right grip and smoothness and streamlined quality that's water resistant and hard enough to absorb an impact into a tree.
Yeah.
But not so hard that when it gets below 50 degrees, the thing feels like a piece of ice in your hand and you can't throw it anymore. There's so much material science behind disc golf that's really interesting, that it's changed the sport.
Yeah.
Years. But in 1998, it was just a kind of fun thing to do. And so I started playing disc golf. I played it really avidly. And at the time, I was living, I think I was in Santa Barbara in 1998. Then I lived back up in the Bay Area. I lived in Davis, California for a few years, and I started playing again there more. I was terrible at the sport.
Yeah.
Awful at it. And for people who play disc golf in the audience or people who aren't familiar with it, the best way to sort of describe a person's capability outside of accuracy, because accuracy is an overriding concern in disc golf too, of course, is how fast can you throw a golf disc? If you would measure the speed with the disc as it comes away from your hand using a radar, how fast is it moving? How fast the disc is moving is indicative, one, of your core understanding about how to produce force through the body and impart it into the disc itself. And it also is generally informing about how far you can throw and how kind of advanced you are at the game. But what's weird too is that as soon as I started playing the game a lot, and this was my own experience, I started to notice that everybody playing it, almost without exception, was capped at a very, very remedial level of force production. That was no more. I mean, I saw variance among the people that I played with and of myself, and I actually threw farther than most of the people I played with, which meant that I could throw a disc about maybe 250 feet.
Yeah.
If I threw it just the right way, not even a football field in distance.
Yeah.
And in order to accomplish that, I had to run fast and throw my whole body into it and jerk the nose of the disc over and get it to fly the right way. And a few people could throw farther than me, and most of them could not throw as far as me. And then one day, when I was down in Santa Barbara in 2004, I attended a tournament where some of the best players in the world had traveled up from Southern California to participate. They lived in San Diego. And they had been enticed by $1,000 first prize. And for the very first time, I got to see professional form.
Yeah.
I got to see actual pros throw a golf disc. And what I saw seemed incomprehensible to me. I could not believe what I was seeing because I was an athletic kid, an athletic adult. I thought I was strong and could throw a golf disc pretty well.
Yeah.
I certainly could outdrive most of my friends. And what these guys could do made an utter mockery of my ability. My disc would come out and it would, turn over and it would fall, kind of fade to the right and then fall limply to the left.
Yeah.
They would throw a shot and it would hiss through the air and it would fly 30 feet off the ground on a rope like a missile and go 425 to 450 feet off into the distance.
Wow.
And I'd be like, what in the hell is going on? And one of the guys that could do this was a little skinny beanpole kid named Bobby Music.
Yeah. Bobby Music, what a name.
Yeah, with a K at the end, Bobby Music. He was a pro from down in Southern California who at the time was definitely ranked in the top 10 in the world.
Was this still in the late 90s?
Yeah, this is this would have been 2004.
Okay. Okay.
So over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
What Bobby Music could do with a disc defied belief. It was like watching somebody walk on water or do literal transubstantiation or something. It just seemed magical and impossible.
Yeah.
And comparing it to my own skill set, I was just not only utterly confused, but very inspired because clearly there was a whole level to this that I did not understand.
Yeah.
When the tournament was over, I walked up to a big group of these players who had come up collectively from Southern California. It included these really good players. And I asked them politely if one of them would be willing to give me a little lesson. Because I explained I'd been playing the game for 6 years at that point, and I didn't really feel like I was getting any better. So one of the guys hopped up and he goes, "Hey man, I'll give you a lesson, sure." So he gave me my first lesson in something that is known in the sport as the X step. The way that I can sort of demonstrate that quickly is that
crossing your legs as you.
Yeah, is that basically imagine I'm moving towards the camera.
Yeah.
Throw the disc. I was walking kind of crouching down low and throwing kind of like I threw a frisbee.
Yeah.
Kind of shambling forward like this. And just kind of guessing when to hurl the disc with my upper body.
Uh-huh.
And he showed me that instead of that, you're supposed to step behind yourself with your back leg. And then you take another step into what is essentially the plant.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you throw the disc. But he showed me something that was both revealing, informative, and ultimately catastrophically sabotaging at the same time. When he showed me how to do the X step, he told me to turn around and effectively walk backwards.
Oh.
Towards the, go like this.
Yeah.
And then turn and throw, which caused my feet to go in completely opposite directions.
Right.
Like this. This hip pointing that way, right hip pointing that way, which is where the disc is supposed to go.
Yeah. Duck-footed.
And then I would run and wrench and pull on the disc as hard as I could with my whole body, spinning in a big circle like that. And so I did this right in front of him during the lesson. And I threw the disc 100 feet farther than I had ever thrown it.
Oh my God, yeah.
It went off like into the distance.
Mm-hmm.
I could not believe it. And I go, Eureka, this is how these guys are throwing the discs this far. I just learned it, of course, I'm not nearly as good at them, but if I throw enough time and energy at this problem, surely within a few years, with practice and ingraining it, I'll be able to throw as far as them too, and won't that be fun? Because it sure looks fun to throw a disc that far.
Yeah.
Little did I know that I'd taken basically the first step that day on a path that I would tread for close to 20 years, trying to figure out how to throw a disc the correct way and never even coming close. Because fundamentally the way that, I'll try not to get too technical here, the way that this guy told me to walk and throw with my feet in opposite directions, bending backwards and throwing the disc while spinning on the ball of my right foot,
Yeah.
is literally the opposite of how you throw the disc the right way. It's everything in it is completely the opposite. And if you start with that as your starting point, you cannot progress. It just caps at an incredibly low level. And you can practice it till the heat death of the universe, and you'll never throw 1 mile per hour faster. So I got immediately better as a result of this lesson. And for the next roughly 6 years, I moved up to Seattle in 2007 from Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
And I started grinding the form every single day when I had an opportunity to. There was a course up pretty close to where I lived at the time, like no more than about a mile away. And I would go there whenever possible, whenever the weather allowed in Seattle, which was, 4 months of the year or something.
Yeah.
And I would throw hundreds of drives per day on one hole at this course, which was a challenging, roughly 300-foot uphill shot, where you have to kind of hit a gap and kind of go up a hill, and the basket's at the top of the hill. I threw that hole. I've estimated I've probably thrown it 300,000 times since 2007. Like completely manic behavior. I would go there 5 days a week and be there for hours in the sun, just throwing and throwing and throwing till my whole body ached and I was exhausted, trying to figure out what am I missing? Because even though I got better, and eventually I got to the point where I could, every now and then, like once a year on average, I could get an ace on this particular hole, which means I'd throw it in from 300 feet away uphill. For every time I aced it, I threw thousands of drives. So it was very, very inconsistent. And I'd go there sometimes a whole day spent getting nowhere near the basket. I'd work for hours to utter exhaustion, not even getting close to the basket. Some days I'd be on, and I never understood
the consistency.
What I was doing right.
Yeah,
I never understood what I was doing right when I had a good day and what I was doing wrong when I had a bad day. It was all completely invisible to me.
Yeah.
I noticed too that I couldn't teach any of what I was doing to other people, including my son Desi, when he was big enough to want to be interested in playing disc golf, which would have been like 2014.
Yeah.
He wanted to come out and play with me. And I'm like, cool, I'll teach you how to throw, kid. And I couldn't communicate anything to him about how to throw. I had no cues because my own form was such a train wreck. And during that span, in addition to throwing gajillions of drives, I studied my own form incessantly. I read form after form, watched form reviews. I listened to gurus and coaches and pros talk about their own biomechanics, trying to get better. I took lessons. Nothing made me better. Nothing even made me 1% better. Nothing changed or moved the dial at all.
Wow.
And it was I considered honestly just sort of giving up on this.
I'm surprised.
endeavor.
Yeah, your utter like will to keep going is crazy.
This is just how I work. Like this, and the thing that was so maddening about it too. I mean, consider objectively, I started playing Magic in January of 1994, and I had the solution to Magic the Gathering by May of 1994.
Right.
Like had figured out that game ahead of the rest of the world. And yet this silly game with a plastic disc where the world champions, some of them have like room temperature IQ. Not to disparage them, but they're like, I've seen some of the people that had succeeded in the sport at a very, very high level, and they could not even rub two words together. How can I be so much more insightful and literally smarter than these guys, and yet they can do these magical things? I'm not even close. It was so maddening and frustrating.
Yeah.
Demoralizing. I threw so much time and energy at it. I could not solve it. And it wasn't until 2023, a million years later and hundreds of thousands of drives later, where I went through this whole growth arc of actual physicality. It related to a meeting that I had, a chance meeting with one of the people who actually was eventually a collaborator on my free teaching system called The Method. He was an incredibly prodigious athletic guy who had been a all-American heptathlete and had also done decathlon in college.
Yeah.
So an incredible all-around athlete.
Yeah.
And he self-trained himself from basically beginner status to being able to throw a golf disc over 600 feet.
Wow.
In a relatively short span of time. Just crazy stuff. Really unprecedented, actually. And learned it as an adult.
Yeah.
And he and I had a chance meeting in Seattle in 2020. Right, not long after the pandemic began. We became really good, close friends. Hung out a bunch. We talked about form and worked on stuff. And when I looked at his form and my form side by side in video, and I looked at where all the body positions were, they were so close. Everything seemed to be so close. Just a little bit off, but it seemed like the form was so similar that there had to be another thing going on that explained why I could throw the disc maybe 400 feet on a good day, and he could throw 600 plus.
Yeah.
Even 650. I mean, just insane shit.
Yeah.
Well, we got talking one day about overall holistic body strength. And in that conversation, we talked about the deadlift, which you're probably familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
Audience. Take a big bar, frame it with your hands around your knees and just stand up.
Yep.
Bar. Sort of requires you to use all of the big muscle groups.
Kind of roll your back up.
Yeah. And it uses 30 plus big muscle groups. It's sort of like the most holistic lift. And it's generally regarded as the gold standard for overall body strength, whether or not you can bench a ton of weight, right? Some people can bench a crazy amount and they can literally bench more than they can deadlift, which is insane to me, but actually true.
Yeah.
And some people are really good at squatting, you know, at different things. Deadlift is regarded as sort of the overall, at least functional body strength thing. And at the time, and I knew this because I had done a deadlift in Chris's garage on like a recent visit because he had a weight bar there.
Yeah.
Deadlift about 200 pounds. And my friends, which is, you know, not a lot of weight. My friend Sebastian could deadlift 500.
Jeez.
Turned out.
Yeah.
500-pound deadlift. And I'm going, well, that's got to be the difference then, right? If the guy's 2.5 times stronger than me, then of course, if he can put all that force into a golf disc, then that's got to be the reason why he can throw 80 and I can only throw 60.
Yeah.
That's about how fast my speed capped out at 60, a weak 60, which meant that my disc didn't have a lot of energetic spin. It could go 60 by whipping it over, but it didn't have a ton of spin. Sebastian could throw 83 miles an hour at the time, which is like incomprehensible velocity. Like it literally looks like a gun.
For a piece of plastic going through the air. Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah, like with enough force that it would like smash through solid wood kind of thing. It has so much kinetic energy in it. So I figured it's got to be a strength thing. Well, I'm going to go get strong too. So I did something that I had been thinking about for a long time, and it made sense to do it because of the pandemic and so on. I got a personal trainer and started working out.
Nice.
Over the next roughly 2.5 years, I improved my strength in the deadlift from 200 all the way up to 465 pounds. I was almost as strong. Thank you. Almost as strong as Sebastian. And I'm not a particularly big guy. I'm 5'9", and at the time I weighed like 180. So I do a 465 pound deadlift, and now I'm out there. It's like, okay, peak strength. I've never been stronger in my life. Time to go throw the disc 80. And I go out there finally, and I do a bunch of throwing in front of a radar. Guess how much faster my 60-mile-per-hour drive was? Between 60 and, now keep in mind, Sebastian can throw 83. And I started deadlifting 200. Now I can deadlift 465. How many miles per hour did I gain in my backhand?
Is this a trick question? Otherwise, I'm going to guess like 70, 72.
It's a serious question. And a lot of people have guessed 70, 72. They figure like 10 miles per hour.
Yeah.
Answer is literally 0.
Really? Okay.
Exactly the same speed.
Yeah. So power isn't the difference.
2.5 times stronger through my whole body, and yet I couldn't throw the disc 1 mile per hour faster.
Yeah.
So that conclusion was completely wrong. And it was really kind of a moment of sort of self-reflection. How much longer do I want to work on this?
Yeah.
But it forced me to kind of just reevaluate all of my assumptions, my conclusions about where the energy was coming from, to really look at it in a different way. And the consequence of that was that I figured out that there was a way for me to actually feel this missing thing. The way that I did it was that I just looked at pro form again. I went back and I just looked at a bunch of pros, and I noticed that they were all doing one thing in common. That no matter what the rest of their form looked like, when they went down the tee pad, get ready to throw, or loading their bodies, the first thing that moved every single time without failure was their left leg. As soon as they were down on their foot, the left leg, and sometimes even before, the left leg would start to twist internally when the rest of the body was still back here. It would start to rotate into their right leg. It looks like this.
Like a baseball swing almost.
Exactly like a baseball swing. And when I looked at my own form on video, I was not doing that. My leg wasn't moving at all. It was in a completely different place.
That's a lot of power in the hips right there.
The thing is that there's so much actually going on that causes that to happen. It's actually a very complicated thing.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, it was like an aha moment. And I went, wait a minute, what if I just do that? Forget about all the throwing the disc thing. What if I just focus on just twisting my left leg first before I do anything else? What will happen? Let's just try it. And so without a disc, I just filmed myself throwing really exaggerating that twist and forgetting about everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And when I looked back at the form, it looked different. It looked way closer to ideal form. A whole bunch of the good body positions suddenly showed up. And I went, wait a minute, what if it's just that? And the truth of the matter is that the reason why this actually was transformative for me and for countless other people at this point who have learned from this free-to-play system called The Method, which you can access for free at learndiscgolf.com.
I'll have it linked in the description too. Yeah.
Please do, yeah. Is that the reason why a focus on the left leg actually gets you to the promised land, even though twisting the left leg is generally a consequence of something else rather than an intention, and it definitely does not make you throw harder.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why this works is because it begins in a different part of the brain. I have a disc right here, and it's actually a tech project that I have underway. So, top secret. If I'm an adult and I pick up a golf disc and I'm planning to throw it at a target,
Yeah.
and I've thrown a frisbee a million times, kid or whatever, and I like disc sports, as soon as I stand on the tee pad, and certainly once I begin to walk, an autonomic response begins in my brain. And it's related to the dominant motor control part of the brain. In this case, as a righty, it's an algorithm that plays in the back left side of my brain. Right? We talked about the left brain, right brain thing.
Yeah.
And because it's an algorithm, subroutine that executes automatically, it plays the same code you've been ingraining for decades if you're an adult. You have no agency in how it plays and when it plays.
Yeah.
No more than you could somehow write perfect cursive with your left hand. No more than you could just jump up on a balance beam and walk a balance beam perfectly. You haven't developed the neurological algorithms that control that.
Yeah.
But you have developed dominant arm algorithms that execute the instant you think throw a disc, the instant you stand on a tee pad. And the consequence of that is that if the dominant arm begins to pull on the disc before you've established stability with the ground, the upper body has nothing to resist its rotation, and it turns first ahead of the legs.
Yeah.
At that point, all you're doing is flinging the disc with your arm. You can't get any momentum to add to it. You certainly can't get your legs to add to it. Most importantly, there's no way to stop it from happening. You cannot will yourself to stop doing it. No more than you could walk up to a bookshelf and have a book tumble off the shelf. You will instinctively grab it with your hand without even thinking. And if it comes down to, if it's dropping in the middle, you'll grab it with your right hand. There's no thought involved in that. It's a reflex.
Yeah.
This is exactly the same problem. You have a reflex that forces you to pull on the disc. And when you pull on the disc really fast with your arm, with no stability, the disc offers no resistance. It also speeds up very slowly. And objects, when they're accelerated very, very rapidly, experience an increased gravitational field. They get G forces. The reason why, like when you go in a roller coaster, you drop down a hill and you go, right? That's all of the mass in your body compressing under increased gravity, essentially. You're accelerating faster than 1G.
Yeah.
Therefore, you weigh more. All of your stuff compresses and squishes against itself. Why you can pass out if you're in an airplane or something, because it's so much weight pressing on your brain and your lungs that you're basically being crushed by your own mass. In a disc, the same thing actually happens. When you accelerate a disc from practically motionless up to 70 plus miles an hour in the blink of an eye, the disc gains a bunch of inertial resistance. It's going through this high G field, and it actually weighs more than 0.3 pounds. Discs can hit like 70 Gs when they're being accelerated by the pros.
It's crazy.
So a disc in a 70 G field weighs, for an instance, 70 times as much. It resists your arm. And that resistance is something that your brain understands. It goes, oh, lightweight object, not lightweight anymore. This thing is heavy. And I know how to add energy to heavy things much better than I know how to add energy to light things. Not only that, but if I give you a crumpled up ball of tissue paper and told you to throw it full power, how hard could you throw that versus a baseball?
Right.
Your body won't even let you throw a crumpled up piece of paper hard because you'll hurt your arm. So it throttles the energy. If this thing weighs nothing, your brain goes, well, you can't throw that hard. Here, have 20% power. Once you begin to establish the proper foundation on the ground, and you're able to use that position of foundation to resist the big muscles in your upper body, you start being able to pull on this disc way faster. And then you start getting this interesting resistance from it that you can cue into and build upon. And it's a very interesting feedback loop. But the key part of this is that when you make the throwing algorithm start and you learn it from a standstill with this twist of the leg, that begins the throw in a totally different part of the brain that's a clean slate. And all of a sudden, all of that instinction, all of the instinctive behavior to pull the disc immediately before anything else happens is gone.
Yeah.
Goes away. And suddenly you can actually make your arm be loose and whippy and elastic. So it forms a natural 3-part lever. And then once you figure that out, you can very easily sequence how to get your leg to make your torso and your arm move on their own. And you're on your way. This was the key piece that I was missing that whole time for 20 years. And no amount of description and mimicry could ever give me the feel. The best example I've used to kind of relate to it is the idea of trying to learn how to ride a bicycle on YouTube.
Yeah.
What would it be like to try to learn how to ride a bike on YouTube, right? You watch a professional ride a bike around, describing how his arms are like at a 90-degree angle and his head is right here, and I'm sitting on the seat like that. And you go, cool, got it. I'm going to go learn how to ride a bike now. Jump on a bike. You fall over, right? Because riding a bike has nothing to do with any of those things. Those are all consequential. They just support the fundamental structure of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, this was a massive revelatory moment for me in my disc golf journey. And once I had it ironed out, and I probably jumped the gun a little bit because back when I first made my first video series in October of 2023, I had a lot of the solution, but I was a long way from the full picture. I believed at the time, quite foolishly, that I had the whole thing. I even made a video about it called Seeing the Elephant. But in retrospect, that was premature. There was a lot of stuff I was still missing. And I've spent the next roughly 2 years iterating and getting better at explaining and understanding all of the biomechanics. And there are a lot of them. I produced 2 different very high production docuseries to document kind of the whole journey, though, and to introduce this idea for learning and suggesting a bunch of drills. The first one is called The Method, and the second chapter is called, it's basically The Method, Chapter 2, Adding Momentum.
Okay.
Which is designed to help, once you learn the foundational stuff, being able to actually use lateral momentum to increase the power of the throw is a whole extra thing you have to learn. So it contains a lot of drills that relate specifically to footwork and how to stay balanced throughout every stage of the footwork and how you're adding the whole time without doing something that's harmful and subtractive. But anyway, the whole project is available for free on both my YouTube channel and on learndiscgolf.com. And I invite anybody out there who plays disc golf. If you've been playing the sport for a week or for a decade and you've been toiling and you feel like you are missing something and you watch your friends effortlessly throw twice as far as you, this could be the answer to it. The system is the real deal, and it has shown its efficacy in thousands of cases. I work with students all the time, and the ability of people to improve using the drills and the insights and so on is profound.
Yeah, I've seen you teach some folks on video and their improvement literally within the video. So it's pretty amazing to see.
Astonishing to see.
Yeah.
And watching people who have been toiling for sometimes decades, unable to ever even get close to anything resembling good form, suddenly just get it. Suddenly they're in these really, really nice classes. It's so incredible. It's so exciting to see. It's so validating. And I just love the sport in general. You know, just as a patron of disc golf, I think I talk about this a lot in the series, but you know, we live in unsustainable times.
Yeah.
Unequivocally. There's all of these big, soft, enraged ticking clocks going on in the background that most people are just pretending aren't real, or that some smart people will solve them for us.
Right.
We'll get fusion next month and then everything will be solved.
Yeah.
We'll receive absolution for a year, 100 years plus of pillaging the world in order to enrich shareholders.
Yeah.
And there are sports like particularly ball golf, which is kind of an embodiment of that same idea. Not all golf is destructive. There certainly is sustainable and environmentally friendly versions of ball golf.
Yeah.
But you also have places like Phoenix, Arizona, where there's 25 golf courses in a desert that is starving for water.
Yeah.
And every one of those golf courses requires tens of millions of gallons of water every year
For irrigation. Yeah.
For irrigation, yeah. And it also destroys the natural environment. They kill everything that lives there and turn it into a giant lawn.
Right.
To for some reason to terraform it to look like Scotland out in the middle of the desert. Well, that comes with a huge environmental cost. And golf has become so unbelievably expensive and elitist and stuff that it's not even accessible to most people. Disc golf is the opposite of that in every way. It's kind of like it's the free-to-play sport. It's practical. It's egalitarian. You don't have to pay more than like $5 for one disc to go out and have a good time with your friends.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why it got so popular in the pandemic because it was so free and accessible.
Yeah. I was really surprised when you said that you started in the late 90s. I didn't know it was around that for that long. It really took off, like you said, in the past couple of years.
Back all the way, it goes all the way back to the 1970s, actually.
Yeah.
It grew out of Frisbee.
Okay.
One of
That's wild.
the people who's featured in the first docuseries is a guy named John Kirkland, who is kind of like the elder statesman of Frisbee.
Yeah.
He was objectively the best Frisbee guy in the world back in the 70s and 80s and stuff. There used to be a Frisbee Olympics at the Rose Bowl with 50,000 people attending and stuff. Yeah. And he was a master of all the trick shots. He could throw a Frisbee 80 miles an hour. He was an insane athlete. And he's seen the evolution of the sport from its infancy all the way through disc golf and then up to the present.
Yeah.
He's in the docuseries. But anyway, disc golf courses, for the most part, are just set up in parks and natural spaces. They respect the native environment. They don't terraform it.
Yeah.
You put in a few baskets, it's still a native place. And playing on a disc golf course gives you a sense of the flavor of the place you're at, too. They all look different.
It's true.
You know, whether you're in high desert scrub, whether or not you're in highlands up in the mountains, or you're down at sea level, or you're by the coast with all the wind, every course is different. Whereas in ball golf, they all kind of look the same.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, like, how hot is it?
What kind
With
of
a few
hazards?
exceptions.
Yeah. What kind of hazards they have? Yeah.
Scale of that sport requires everything to basically look the same. And disc golf is totally different. And it's totally accessible. And getting back to the original point, it's a really, really interesting exercise in problem solving in physics.
Yeah.
Because what you can do with a disc versus what you can do with a ball hit by a club, no comparison. The discs have so many interesting properties when they're thrown correctly and with this gyroscopic spin they have.
Yeah.
They just sort of tunnel through the air. It's almost like they're not flying at all. They're almost tunneling through the air. You can make them do anything. You can move them in all of these ways. There's shots where you throw a big arcing shot around a corner, and then the disc has just the right angle where it slows down and it planes out, and then it goes around another corner.
Yeah,
So you can,
that's crazy.
Throw it down a double corridor, and it's crazy what you can do with them. Endless possibilities, endless problem solving. It's one of the things that attracted both me to the sport and others to it. And it has consumed a huge amount of my time and energy over the last, well, at this point, I guess 27 years.
Yeah.
But a lot more increasingly with the two projects and stuff. So I encourage anybody who's trying to learn or is curious about that to go check out the site. Maybe subscribe to my disc golf channel. And there's a lot of cool information in there. It's designed to kind of resonate with just about anybody to help people improve and enjoy the sport more.
That's awesome. I can't for the life of me throw discs, so I'll have to check it out myself. I was football, basketball, and lacrosse were my sports growing up. Sports where you can hit people. I've been a big guy my entire life.
You're like a pretty big guy to me.
Yeah, I'm 6'4".
You're holy shit.
Yeah.
Dude, I could teach you in an afternoon how to throw a disc on fire.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm pretty athletic. I'm more of a Jack Black type now. I used to be 6'4", 205 in high school, so I was a linebacker, and yeah.
Seriously, it would just be setting you up in positions where you could utilize that strength in a sequential way.
Yeah.
To get all the energy revved up and make sure that it goes into the disc under leverage with biomechanical advantage of leverage. You would bomb the disc. I wouldn't even have you walk. I would just have you literally do a standstill.
Okay.
Show you how to throw the disc from a standstill and how to weight shift into your brace. You would crush the disc. I'm not kidding you. I could probably teach you how to throw a disc 70 miles an hour in a relatively short span of time.
Oh, I can't even imagine that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Throwing it in
firing
my
a
backyard,
cannon.
I look like a girl. It's insane.
Yeah, it's because your arm, you can't
Yeah.
stop your arm from throwing.
And I don't want to hurt my wife either. That's my excuse.
To be continued. I want to move to the last kind of main subject, I think, as we've been talking for a good while.
Yeah.
And that relates to something I did not think I would do after the success of Path of Exile. How do you top a game this good?
Seriously.
And this successful? How do you forget about lightning striking twice in the same spot? PoE is like 10 lightning bolts all hitting in the same spot.
Yeah.
How do you top that?
Right.
And because of that, I thought for the longest time that I was not going to bother making another game. However, increasingly a problem loomed in the gaming community, the gaming ecosystem, that I felt like I needed increasingly to address. It actually relates to something that I brought up and proposed with Chris way back in, I think, 2015 or 2016.
Wow.
I had been introduced to a game that is certainly the seminal product, the founding game in an entire genre that now has something like 800 different versions. And it's the original roguelike deck builder game. A game that was produced in the spare time of a guy who was going to, I believe, an Ivy League school, although it might have been Stanford.
Yeah.
A guy named Peter Whalen, who in his spare time cobbled together this game that blended mechanics from the deck builder genre. Probably most notably a game called Dominion, which I'm sure many, many people in the audience have played at one time or another. You're nodding, so I think you're familiar with it.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Dominion, I think it was preceded by a game called Ascension, which was actually designed by a pretty famous Magic player. But Dominion kind of took it a little further and got very, very, very popular. The idea that you start with a deck of rags, very weak and ineffective deck that you draw random cards off and play with every turn.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the key pieces of a deck builder is you begin to modify the cards in the deck to make it stronger over time.
Yeah.
So by the end, it's a lean, mean churning machine that you can draw through every turn and you do all this cool stuff. And it's very fun. And you get this big payoff at the end when the deck really comes together. And that idea of using a deck of cards to represent an RPG player essentially was blended with a super old throwback style of game called a roguelike.
Yeah.
Which many people are familiar with. They may not know the origins of Rogue, what Rogue was, but for those not in the know, way back in the 1980s when people were playing multiplayer online gaming, me included, although I did not play Rogue, you would log into a person's bulletin board, and there'd be an ongoing multiplayer dungeon thing going on what was called a MUD, multiple user dungeon. And people were programming these MUDs. They were basically almost like digital D&D.
Yeah.
They followed a lot of the same D&D rules and all the Lord of the Rings D&D style fantasy tropes and so on.
That's really cool.
Popular of those games was called Rogue. And Rogue was not only a dungeon crawl that was very, very simple, kind of navigating on a big piece of graph paper, but it was exceptional because it was very hard and it had the fundamental roguelike mechanic. Death is permanent and it ends that run. If you die, you have to start over and go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Dream Quest, this game that came out in 2014, it was released on iOS to no fanfare or critical acclaim at all.
Yeah.
Nobody downloaded or played it. Was released in 2014, and it blended these two mechanics together for the very first time. It was a roguelike, very simple, very bad graphics, honestly, roguelike game that blended this deck builder element, where you sculpt and construct a deck that's associated with each class, and every enemy you fight has its own deck that it plays against you.
Yeah.
And so the fights are fairly random because you're drawing anywhere from 2 to 5, 6 cards a turn, as are the enemies. And you never really know what you're going to get, and you have to be malleable and adapt on the fly.
Yeah.
But most of the skill isn't so much in what you play, it's more of how do you sculpt and build the deck. That's kind of the thing that's fun about it. Watching your deck adjust and come together until eventually you've got this lean, mean killing machine. You've got a streamlined deck. It is thematically based around the class that you're playing. So if you're playing a wizard, you've got a bunch of card draw and spells that deal damage and draw more cards. Maybe they give you extra turns.
Yeah.
And you have mana cards too that add mana to your pool that you can then spend to play the spells. That's one of the tropes. There's a warrior style class that just does a bunch of attacks, has a lot of defensive cards. Anyway, it was unbelievably brilliant design. A game that I was initially introduced to and then dismissed because the graphics were so bad. But eventually I circled back to it and got insanely addicted. As a cool side story, my playing Dream Quest actually led to its designer, Peter Whalen, getting hired at Blizzard Entertainment.
Amazing.
Hearthstone.
Yeah.
I think that's the story I told you about before.
Yep. I recognize the name Peter Whalen. Yeah.
Yeah. I recommended him to a guy named Mike Donay, who was at the time Hearthstone's lead balance designer. Told him that Peter Whalen was essentially a free agent and that they should snap him up. And so they did. And for the next 7 years, he was the lead on lots of sets. And the consequence of Peter Whalen being a front and center person at Blizzard and talking about Hearthstone design compelled him to go and talk about his old project, Dream Quest.
Yeah.
People went, oh, Peter Whalen made a game when he was in grad school. Cool. I'll go check that out. Oh, it's only $3. I'll download that. Dream Quest got actually really, really popular. Sold hundreds of thousands of copies behind the scenes and kind of birthed that whole genre.
Was it purely mobile? Like only iOS?
It's actually it's on Steam as well.
Okay.
So people played it. I played it exclusively on a mixture of my phone and iPad.
Gotcha.
But definitely plenty of people have played it. The game is so remedial that it feels, or at least like its graphical presentations and requirements, that it feels much more like a phone game.
Yeah.
Than it does feel like it doesn't do anything with the real estate.
Okay. Yeah.
A lot more screen space. It doesn't really take advantage of that. You can play the game perfectly fine on your phone. And most importantly, it inspired this entire genre. The most successful of that genre was a game called Slay the Spire, which came out in 2017.
Yeah.
And did very well initially, and then gained a lot of extra momentum during the pandemic when people were streaming games a lot more often. A lot of big streamers started to Slay the Spire. Yeah. And eventually it sold over 10 million copies.
And they're making a second. Yeah.
Mega Platinum. Yeah. And I believe Slay the Spire 2, if all things go according to plan, the studio that makes it is seriously, I could probably.
Oh, really? That's awesome.
Yeah. Is based in Seattle. And if all goes according to plan with them, they're going to be releasing the sequel later on this year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because of the success of Slay the Spire, I played that game to death. I played the game Balatro a ton, which is still in the news.
Yeah.
It's incredibly brilliant.
Insanely addictive. Yeah.
The best mobile game I think I've probably played in a decade. It is absolutely incredible. And the success of a bunch of other roguelike deck builders, and the space is very extensive now, something like 800. And yet, nobody has made the equivalent of Path of Exile in this space, in my opinion. Nobody has taken the very best of the games in the genre, discarded the bad, added even more fun elements, disseminated the fun, really figured it out, and produced it in a higher quality, non-indie package. And I've begun that labor.
Amazing.
I started about a year ago. I co-founded a game studio with a long-term friend of mine who I brought on board mainly because he was the best Dream Quest player in the world, who I know of. My childhood friend, his name is Obi. Incidentally, Obi was the guy I played my first game of Magic the Gathering against. And when I thought about making this company, my first thought was bring Obi on board. Obi has he knows Dream Quest better than anybody.
Yeah.
And the game that I'm making is directly inspired by Dream Quest, specifically, rather than Slay the Spire, which cited Dream Quest as an inspiration, but ventured off from it in a lot of interesting mechanical design.
Yeah.
Some of it good, some of it not as good. And I was aided in this by the fact that there's a very famous person in Magic the Gathering, a guy named Jay Schneider, who is widely credited as the creator of the idea of mana curve in Magic. Whenever anyone talks about curving out, that's Jay Schneider's idea. That he was a chess prodigy when he was a kid, and he transitioned to playing Magic when he was, I think, in his teens. Created the original Sly deck, the mono red mana curve deck that transformed how people thought about threat-based strategies.
Yeah.
Prior to that, Control had just ruled the game. Jay has since become a foundational person in the game development scene in Seattle. He has been co-running a game development course at, I believe, the University of Washington. That is highly competitive, that people wait sometimes years to get into.
Yeah.
And it's provided basically a feeder system into the broader game design industry. Seattle is known for tech and music, but it has a huge game design history. A lot of games have been made here,
Yeah.
including Slay the Spire. So Jay was instrumental in getting together a team. I set to work on building that team starting around in May of last year. My company is called Card Advantage Games, which
I
is
love
a title suggested. Thank you. I did not come up with it. It was actually Chris Wilson's suggestion. We were having a talk about my game company last year. What should I call it? Should I call it The Company? Because my disc golf system is called The Method.
Mm-hmm.
My Magic deck is called The Deck. I'm like, would it be a little arrogant to call it The Company? I mean, there's a lot of out there. And he immediately suggested, well, call it Card Advantage. It's a card game you're making. And I went, you know what? That's perfect.
Yeah.
I love that. So the studio is called Card Advantage Games. We actually haven't we haven't announced the product yet, or the game. It's going to be coming, we're going to be showing the first bits of it and teasing it to the public next month.
Awesome.
At a convention here in Seattle called WorldCon. And WorldCon isn't really so much a gaming convention as a sci-fi fantasy writers convention.
Okay.
Which is great, actually, because one of the cornerstones, one of the foundational things to set my game apart from other games in the genre is that we're really, really going after narrative and art in a way that other games really haven't explored.
Yeah.
And the narrative anthology, which is 150 pages long at this point, with more coming. Obviously, you're not going to interact with this when you play the game.
Right.
Little bits and pieces of it, but it's sort of like, it's like this, essentially, only in written form. It's not a comic right now. Has been written by some of the most esteemed fantasy and sci-fi authors alive, including a guy named Alan Dean Foster, who is the person who wrote the Star Wars canon back in the 1970s. He wrote the novelized Star Wars series.
Okay. Wow.
And Transformers and Aliens also. And he's sort of like the George R. R. Martin of sci-fi. And he wrote one of the narrative anthologies for one of the characters in our game, and the other, well, it'll release with 6 characters total in the initial release.
Okay.
If all goes according to plan, and then we're going to have 2 additional expansions, basically a DLC.
Awesome.
That introduce a couple more characters and more associated maps, worlds that are associated with them. But my project here is basically blending the very best as I understand it, with my almost 50 years of experience as a game player and designer, the very best components of Dream Quest, Slay the Spire, and Balatro, all welded and wound up into an incredibly incomparable roguelike deck builder / RPG experience with incredible sound design, sound engineering, beautiful visuals and aesthetics.
It sounds amazing.
Replayability and incredible, incomparable narrative. That's what my company is working on.
Awesome.
We're announcing our project next month. It's come a long way in the last year. It's very, very fun and playable right now. It's got a hell of a long way to go. We have a lot of things to add to it, but I'm very confident that when this game is complete, we're probably aiming to have at least a closed beta within a year, maybe a year and 3 months or so. 15 to 16 months is what we're aiming at.
Awesome.
Yeah, at least it's something where we feel like it's ready to show. We've got a couple of zones complete, and you can really play the game and feel like you're playing a nearly finished product. But when it completes, when we actually go into wide release, the intended narrative will cover 6 characters with 6 associated maps that you navigate, which are all like little mini worlds. The plot of this game is objectively an A+, and I give PoE's plot a B- at best. It's so much better in so many ways. It's such an incredibly cool story.
Awesome.
That I spent about a year working on before I handed it off to my chief narrative writer, a guy named Alex Schwartzman, who is a very, very accomplished writer and translator in his own right, and one of my Pro Tour colleagues from back in the late 90s.
Crazy.
Yeah. It's been a hell of an adventure, and I wake up every day really, really excited to work on the project.
Yeah.
Watching it come together every single day. We have an incredible, incomparable team of industry veterans and people who have never worked on games before, but have always been kind of wanting to work on a project like this.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the art and art design. And the way this game is going to look is like nothing anyone has ever seen or played before. It's really unique and cool.
That's super exciting.
So those are the 2 main things I've been working on since PoE.
Yeah.
I'll read all the comments of whatever people are curious about. I can divulge a lot of things. I can't tell every story, of course, because we're all under lifetime NDAs as a consequence of the sale to Tencent. But
Right.
I believe in disclosure of anything that might seem interesting to the public. So if you have questions, if you want to know the thought process behind individual decisions that might be important to you or whatever, just feel free to ask, and I'll definitely read and answer. I'll reply to all the ones that people.
And I mean, where can people find you? Like, what's the best place to actually see what you're currently working on with Card Advantage games and things like that?
Great question. I have 2 YouTube channels. One of them is called, I think it's just called The Brian Weissman.
The Brian
And
Weissman,
the
yeah.
reason why I've been using that title, my wife actually suggested it, is because for years I've been playing on Magic the Gathering Online, going back to the early 2000s. And
Yeah.
my name on Magic Online is Brian Weissman. And hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times I found myself in a game with somebody who recognizes the name. And they always ask, "Are you the Brian Weissman?"
The Brian Weissman, yeah.
Yeah, I actually am. Good to meet you. So I just put that there for clarity. So my YouTube channel is the Brian Weissman, and my disc golf channel is, I think, Brian Weissman Disc Golf or Brian Disc Golf or something like that. You can find it quite easily.
Yeah, and I'll have both of those linked in the description as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. A good way to contact me is through the learndiscgolf.com website. It's another way to contact me. I don't, honestly, I abhor, I loathe Instagram and TikTok and stuff. I understand that they're what the kids are using these days.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the way that a lot of people integrate or interact with their followers, fan base, whatever you want, customers, etc.
Yeah.
I will not use Twitter 100% on general principles. So I will not be on Twitter ever.
Yeah.
Although my company might, but I'll never be on there. And, but I think overall the best way to reach me is probably just through YouTube comments. I read every comment that people leave. I reply to everyone. I share my email address all the time, which I'm happy to do through directly through email. So I'm sorry, through YouTube.
Okay.
So if you want to correspond with me about a Magic question, disc golf question, game design question, whatever, feel free to reach out. I take the time and care to really get to know every person who takes the time to do that with me. I think everyone more than deserves that.
I mean, you've done that for me, Brian. So, I mean, I can't honestly thank you enough for your time and everything that you've put into this with going back and forth with me, telling this origin story of the origin story. Like I said, I think people are really going to enjoy it.
I really hope so. You have my complete gratitude, seriously. Yeah. When I saw your video and the amount of love and care and work and research that you put into it, try to really be as accurate as possible, to say nothing for your amazing broadcasting voice and overall just aesthetic. I really felt like you were the person to help me tell this story initially. So I'm very, very grateful for your time, your patience, your incredible questions, storytelling, editing, everything else.
I'm honored. Yeah. So good, so great to have you, Brian, and I hope that we can speak further on some other topics in the future.
To be continued.
Yeah.
Yeah. Looking forward to that. Thank you.
Awesome. I hope you enjoyed my first go at these casual conversations. Brian is such an enthralling storyteller, and I was super fortunate to have him as my first guest. Who else would you guys like me to have on my channel or try to reach out to for another one of these conversations? What was your favorite tale that Brian told today? Definitely let me know down in the comments. Brian and I will be responding to everyone that we can. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe to my channel for more documentaries and videos like this, and I'll see you all in the next one. Farewell.